Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1 Funeral. Thea, dear, we're going to the funeral. Pack up and we'll meet you downstairs, the middle-aged woman choked out, her hand covering her mouth as she walked out of the room. Okay, Mom, I'll be right there. Sitting beside the bed, Thea Quinn watched her mother disappear from view, her mind racing. 3 days had passed since she'd traveled here, or rather, merged, and she'd slowly come to terms with her current identity. She'd gone from a relatively successful young man to a wealthy woman whose family had suffered a tragic fate. Her past life, let's call it a past life, came flooding back like fragments from a movie: birth, school, graduation, marriage, everything, seemingly real yet surreal. She felt neither joy nor resentment, simply watching from an outsider's perspective, calm and indifferent. What was her original name? She couldn't remember. Compared to her past life, her current physical condition was largely dominated by Thea's original emotions: sadness, grief, and frustration. She had always been Thea, and would always be Thea. She ignored the black dress. Although her consciousness had once dominated her, she still felt a strong resistance to women's clothing. She donned the white vest, black blazer, and black mid-heeled shoes her mother had prepared. Luckily, Thea wasn't yet an adult. Wearing high heels to such a solemn occasion would have been a disaster. She fixed her hair in the mirror. She had thick, long, dark brown hair, fair skin, and pale green eyes. Her calm gaze betrayed a sense of longing for her deceased loved ones. Watching the news on her first day after the fusion, she had determined her situation. It was a world similar to the Green Arrow TV series, perhaps not, perhaps, as there was too little information to determine the specifics. She had seen a portion of the show in her previous life, and if she wasn't mistaken, she was the Green Arrow's younger sister, a rebellious, unruly, and troubled young woman. She picked up her handbag and descended the stairs. Fortunately, Thea was still a good girl, having not yet developed a host of negative habits due to the loss of her family. The fusion of their two souls had given her a mental strength greater than that of an average person. The mental energy, fed back into her body, gave her a powerful stride despite being a frail 15-year-old. She walked over to her mother, Moira Queen, and whispered, "Let's go, Mom." Moira said nothing, simply hugged Thea, and they entered the car in silence. Robert Queen, born in 1958, died in 2007 at the age of 51. He was a brilliant entrepreneur in Star City, a mentor and friend. With his passing, we have lost a great father and a sincere friend. Oliver Queen, born in 1985, died in 2007 at the age of 22. He was a child of Star City, a gift from God. Listening to the pastor's speech, Thea's thoughts were a little scattered. The pastor was full of praise for Robert, but he offered little, just a few words about his brother. Her brother truly had few achievements to commend him. He was a playboy, promiscuous, irresponsible, and besides his good looks, he had few other qualities. But who could have imagined that his saintly father would sow the seeds of disaster for the city, and that in a moment of crisis, it was this playboy who saved everyone. The loss of her loved one still grieved Thea deeply, and she clutched her hand to stifle her tears. While she knew her brother wasn't dead, the father she'd always treated like his own son was indeed gone. Yes, treated like his own. How ironic, considering she wasn't even a Quinn. Her father had always known the truth, yet he still treated her like his own daughter, never once holding a grudge. Reason could no longer contain her emotions, and Thea sobbed into her mother's shoulder. "Dear, cry, it'll be all right," Moira said tenderly, gently stroking Thea's hair. Not long after, the funeral concluded. 2 empty coffins were buried in the Quinn family cemetery. "My condolences, Moira." "My condolences, Thea." A stern-faced, well-dressed middle-aged man approached the two and spoke calmly. Upon seeing this man, Thea immediately recognized him as her biological father, Malcolm Merlyn. This man is a complete schemer and ambitious scheming mastermind. He orchestrated the shipwreck of the Gold Queen, and is arguably the final boss of the first Arrow series. While he may appear gentle and unarmed, he's actually a formidable martial artist. Codenamed Black Arrow, he's a master of archery, swordplay, and combat. He defeated Green Arrow twice in the first series. He also has a strong presence. He's been incredibly active throughout the first 4 Arrow series, and Thea traveled through time before the 5th. It's unclear what happened, but given his survivability, he's unlikely to die. From what he's shown, despite his treacherous nature, he still loves his children. Perhaps he could learn martial arts from him? In the original storyline, Thea was to be trained by Malcolm in the 3rd series to become Green Arrow's assistant, Red Arrow. Could she possibly advance that process? Thea is feeling incredibly insecure, even though the main storyline is still 5 years away and Oliver is still fishing on Inferno Island. But then she saw a striking name on the guest list, Wayne Enterprises. If I remember correctly, this is Batman's company. What kind of world have I entered? I don't know if he knows that I am his daughter yet. As a mother, Moira must know. Will she tell Malcolm? What does the show say? Thea really can't remember. Malcolm is not a good person. If he doesn't know the truth and she goes over and makes a mistake, she will lose her life. At the same time, Thea is also very reluctant to recognize Malcolm. After all, it was he who killed her adoptive father and made her half-brother wander for 5 years, suffering physically and mentally. Although this is the price of becoming a hero, it is too high a price. Anyway, there is no good idea at the moment, so I can only let this idea go. Standing silently beside Moira, watching her mother thank each guest for their condolences. What a complicated woman. She knows all about Malcolm's plan. Doesn't she love her family? She devoted her entire life to this family, willing to sacrifice her career and even her life for her children. Yet, she watched her husband and son die at sea, and the remorse and resentment she expressed afterward were undeniable. It was truly a contradiction. Perhaps the only way to describe her was to have an ostrich mentality, feeling better as long as no one died in front of her. Perhaps Malcolm was exploiting this. Thea, let me introduce you. This is Walter Steele, your father's right-hand man, Moira said, introducing the bald black man. According to the plot, he would become her stepfather in the coming years. Thea remained detached, nodding calmly without saying anything. Her feelings for Moira were ambiguous. Neither close nor distant. She neither opposed nor supported her finding another man. Perhaps this was always Thea's attitude. Chapter 2 Malcolm Merlyn. Thea ignored everyone who came to comfort her, maintaining a sullen expression. The truth was, she didn't recognize many of them, had no memory of them at all, revealing how few connections Thea had with these families. No one found it strange. After all, a 15-year-old girl, having lost both her father and her brother, had a grim expression. It would have been a problem if she'd greeted everyone she met. Thea, my condolences, the young man said, ignoring her icy expression and patting her shoulder. He was the only young man Thea knew presently, a close friend of her brother Oliver. His name was Tommy Merlyn. He was Malcolm Merlyn's son, his only son, and by blood, her half-brother. It was a bit amusing. Oliver and Tommy, her 2 half-brothers, had the same father and mother, respectively. Their relationship was quite complicated. After all, their relationship was different. Thea nodded and whispered, "Thank you." Tommy was heartbroken, truly heartbroken, lost in a state of anguish. He had grown up in the Quinn household, and he had felt for Robert and Oliver like a father and brother. Their deaths now left him devastated. The hundreds of people in the room were all overcome with grief, but the only truly saddened people were Tommy and Moira. Knowing Oliver was still alive, Thea barely counted as half. Giving Tommy a gentle hug, Thea didn't linger in the crowd, but walked back to her car. Seeing her return to her car, Moira quickly parted ways with the crowd, and the 2 of them returned to the Quinn mansion in silence. Rejecting Moira's suggestion that they sleep together, Thea returned to her room alone. There were still 5 years until the story began. She should waste that time. This world was too dangerous. The entire storyline of Arrow has been about someone close to Oliver being kidnapped, and then Oliver unleashing his mighty powers to rescue them. Every time the protagonist rescues someone, the villain kidnaps another, and the protagonist rescues them again. This cycle has been repeated for 5 seasons. What a ridiculous storyline. And that's only after Green Arrow returns home. What about before? That's a 5-year vacuum, and now he's the sole heir to the Quinn organization. Kidnappings and ransoms are rampant. The Quinn family's hired bodyguards are as useless as ever. The strongest bodyguard is probably John Dougal, but he's still derided as kindergarten level by the League of Assassins. The most crucial question is whether Malcolm, the mastermind, will be tempted by the Quinn family's vast fortune. Theoretically, if he marries Moira and kills her, the entire fortune will belong to him. Thea feels that if he doesn't know she's her daughter, there's a 70% to 80% chance he'll do it. It would be tragic to be killed by her own father, unaware of the truth. In the original plot, Thea had fallen terribly after the death of her father and brother. She might have given up on the idea of a complete rebellion, hoping to see the fun unfold. But she certainly wouldn't touch such things now, let alone promiscuity. The influence of her past life spirit now disgusted her. Even the thought of men. How would Malcolm react if he saw her heroically inheriting the Quinn group? Putting herself in his shoes, would she do it? Of course. Rubbing her temples, Thea grew increasingly worried about her current situation. It was then she realized that Moira's constant outreach at the funeral might have been partly a way of securing some protection. She was a great yet pitiful mother. She subconsciously didn't realize Malcolm would harm his illegitimate daughter because she didn't understand his true nature, a wolf, a man-eating beast. He had no friends, only enemies, living and dead. Oliver had repeatedly crossed him throughout the story, and he had always admitted that Oliver was like his own son. But when this so-called son stood in his way, he showed no mercy. Her biological daughter had been betrayed time and again. Fortunately, Malcolm was still at the peak of his powers. As long as he didn't disrupt his plans, he wouldn't attack her, assuming, of course, that he knew she was his daughter. Her martial arts training wasn't a priority now, her life and death were the real issue. Did he know the truth? This question consumed Thea. She pondered for half the night before finally falling into deep sleep. In her dreams, she saw the battle between Superman and Batman in Dawn of Justice, where she perished like an ant in the chaos. Breaking out in a cold sweat, Thea couldn't fall asleep. She lay drowsy for the rest of the day until Moira called her for breakfast. "Oh, Thea, you look so bad. Do you want to see a doctor?" Moira asked worriedly, hugging Thea. "It's okay, Mom. I didn't sleep well last night. I'll lie down a bit later." Tommy joined her during dinner. He'd spent far more time at Quinn's than at her own. Seeing him speak to her with such familiarity, Thea suddenly realized where her breakthrough lay. On Tommy. His mother knew the truth all along, so there was no need to test it. All he had to do was see if Malcolm knew. He'd be making out with Tommy in front of him. If he knew, he'd definitely try to stop her. While being with a man was uncomfortable, it was the only solution. Thankfully, Tommy knew her well enough and wasn't too bothered. For the sake of his life, he'd have to endure it. Originally, Thea had a crush on Tommy, but thankfully, the writers had some sense and didn't go so far as to create such a shady plot. Tommy, unaware of the truth, flatly rejected Thea, claiming they were just siblings. They were indeed siblings by blood, and it was a blessing they weren't turned into doing you and me wanking drama. Over the next few days, Thea acted as usual in front of Moira, but secretly she grew closer to Tommy, partly to attract the big boss's attention and partly to protect herself from him. Well, both sides were used to target Malcolm. There was no other way. He was the invisible emperor of Star City, and if she wanted to survive and live a fulfilling life, she had to get his approval. Fortunately, she was his daughter. This was an unchangeable reality. As long as she explained the facts clearly, she would be as stable as a rock. The people around her didn't overly interfere with her daily neutral attire of suits and trousers. They all thought she had gone through a major change and her mentality was a little off, and that it would be fine after a while. Actually, Thea had already thrown all those short skirts and high heels into the deepest part of the closet. She didn't know what would happen in the future, but at least she didn't want to wear them anymore. Tommy was a really good friend. He didn't get annoyed by Thea's constant attention. He thought she was deeply hurt, and he kept trying to cheer her up in various ways. Even neglecting his official girlfriend, Laurel Lance. Chapter 3, Unveiling the Truth. Tommy's life has been incredibly busy lately. He spends his days sprinting around the city with Thea, and his nights engaging in strenuous physical exercise with Laurel. He's barely had the energy to hit the bars or clubs. Perhaps out of revenge for Oliver having sex with her sister while they were dating, Laurel quickly hooked up with Tommy after a few words. There's no such thing as a friend's wife being cheated on. Didn't you see Digger, Green Arrow's staunchest comrade in the original story, such a loyal, black man who loved his brother so deeply that he nearly cheated on his brother's wife after his brother's death? He even nearly had his own nephew call him dad. The heroic Green Arrow, completely oblivious to the situation, cheered his comrade on. So, while Tommy was heartbroken by his friend's death, he felt no pressure to take care of his friend's wife. Laurel was the future Black Canary, so stamina was a given when she went wild. Tommy had lost a ton of weight after a few days of intense exertion. Thea understood what had happened, but she deeply despised the act of holding a woman in his arms while weeping over a photo of her deceased friend. So, seeing Tommy didn't seem to be dying, she continued to drag him around the city, determined to ensure that Malcolm would know if there was even one person in the city who knew him. Today, Thea had traded her woman's suit for a sleeveless tank top. The weather was getting hotter, so she could still tolerate showing her arms. Looking at the bulge in her chest, she was faced with a harsh reality: she would never be a man again. Fortunately, this body wasn't the type with the most voluminous features. It was only at grade B level. While it would grow a bit, it was still within normal dimensions, and exercise wouldn't cause nosebleeds. That was great. If it grew to the size of 2 basketballs, she'd have to give up on martial arts. Knock, knock, knock. She heard a knock on the door. After a moment's wandering thoughts, she opened it and was surprised to see a middle-aged man standing there. "Hey, Thea, you look like you're recovering well," the middle-aged man, though serious, managed to smile. "Oh my God, big boss, you're finally here." Thea was exhausted from dragging Tommy around these past few days, but there was no sign of him. Sometimes she wondered if Malcolm had gone somewhere else. She'd practiced this scenario many times in private, regaining her composure and saying calmly, "Uncle Merlyn, good morning." This ordinary courtesy perfectly matched the family's past. Malcolm smiled and nodded without saying much, and Thea stepped aside to let him in. The day was the day to decide the outcome of many days' plans. Pretending to watch TV, Thea saw him enter her mother's room from the corner of her eye. She immediately grabbed the teacup. Unaware of the level of martial arts in this world, or the level of Malcolm's training with a ninja master, she was wary of being noticed, so she took off her shoes and approached him with brisk steps. "Hey, Moira, you're so beautiful." Malcolm's tone told her he was in a good mood. He hadn't had a happy day since his wife's death, and for him to speak so briskly was the limit. "Mr. Merlyn, what are you doing here?" Every time they contacted each other before, they'd always run to the top of a hill on some small path. Open and above-board visits like this were rare. Haha, Malcolm didn't answer directly, only smiling as he poured himself a glass of wine. "You know, Moira, besides my wife, you're one of the few women in the world who still makes my heart flutter. I was originally planning to marry you, but haha, I discovered something interesting." Moira seemed to have barely heard the mention of marrying her, staring intently at Malcolm. "What's going on? Our agreement is complete, and you can't interfere with my life anymore. What do you think of Tommy and Thea? What a coincidence. You only have one daughter and I only have one son. There are no obstacles in our way. Merlyn Group and Quinn Group can establish closer ties." From outside, Thea immediately knew Malcolm didn't understand the truth. Moira hadn't told him the truth. As expected, beautiful women can be deceptive, and even this cheap old woman of hers is a master at deceiving and fooling people. It seems men are always the most clueless in this regard, no matter how cunning a man is. Moira's ear blew up in shock. No, absolutely not. Such a strong reaction was honestly beyond Malcolm's expectations. No one had spoken to him so loudly in years, save for the ninja master who'd scared him to death. Given his usual temperament, if he'd had a bow and arrow, he'd probably have just shot one. Moira realized her voice was a bit loud, but she glared. "No, I don't agree. My request cannot be denied." Moira Queen. Thoughts of the woman she loved most besides her wife vanished into thin air. Malcolm had never been afraid of a glaring contest. Outside, Thea knew the drama was about to begin and raised her teacup high. It was a classic TV scene, the teacup slamming outside the door when the truth is revealed. I wonder if foreigners around the world have seen this kind of show? Unfortunately, the floor was wooden, so the effect wasn't great. Hopefully, Malcolm would hear it after his excitement. "Let me explain." Moira, frightened by Malcolm's wide-eyed expression, frantically took a swig from the bottle, her mind frantically racking for explanation. Seeing her unusual behavior, Malcolm sensed something was amiss. He'd managed to survive the clutches of a ninja master who'd lived for over 700 years, his ability to read people's minds was unmatched. He calmed down and slowly sat down, ready to listen. Moira pondered, but couldn't come up with a good reason. Her husband and son had silently perished in the process. There was no point in resisting her daughter's arranged marriage. If she didn't agree, he'd definitely attack Thea, a truly tragic tragedy. She pondered over the situation, realizing that this secret had previously been shared between them, becoming hers after her husband's death. Now, telling the truth would simply mean it went from being a one-person secret to a two-person secret. She could accept that. As long as Thea herself didn't know, everything would be fine. "Thea is your daughter," he whispered softly, closing his eyes. He sank deeply into the sofa, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. From outside, Thea couldn't see Malcolm's expression and was a little worried that the shock might affect his hearing. But the arrow was already on the string, and she quickly dropped the teacup to the floor with a dull thud. There was no other way, the wooden floor was too much of a nuisance. He knew he wouldn't be so idle as to calculate the cup's height by using the point of force where it landed on the floor under the acceleration of gravity. After all, this was the Black Arrow generation, not the Death God's elementary school generation. Hearing the unusual noise outside, Malcolm, a distinguished graduate of Nandarbit, though still a little dizzy, had already reacted. He rushed to the door and flung it open. Seeing Thea's vacant eyes, even such a calm and composed boss was stunned, his expression awkward, and he didn't know what to say. Chapter 4: Getting Drunk. Seeing Thea staring blankly at him, Malcolm, despite his years of experience, didn't know what to say to ease the awkward atmosphere. His usual eloquence was gone, and he secretly resented his limited English vocabulary. He wanted to ask Thea if she had something to say, if she had heard something, but seeing her glazed eyes, even a fool could tell she'd heard everything she shouldn't have. He deeply regretted rushing to Quinn's house to propose marriage. Why hadn't he investigated beforehand? With his intelligence, he would surely have known the truth. He wouldn't have to be so embarrassed now. Thea felt her life was completely safe and it was time to call it a day. Her face was a little stiff from maintaining this expression, and she tried to force out tears, but the actor's self-cultivation had never seen poor acting, so nothing came out. She could only snort and quickly run away. "Thea!" Moira screamed at the top of her lungs behind her. All Thea could do was internally apologize for taking advantage of the woman who cared so wholeheartedly for her. She hoped to treat her well in the future and make up for what happened today. She ran out of the house and found a fancy bar for the second act of her runaway life, getting drunk. Thea wasn't worried about being bullied. The owner of such a fancy place must have some connection to Malcolm. It was the smaller bar that was the real danger. Her suspicions were proven right. The bar was owned by one of his men, and they were the hardcore kind. He'd received a call from the boss asking him to take care of this girl. Malcolm had harped on about this trivial matter 3 times, frightening the bar owner into treating Thea like his own mother. He had several burly men with flabby faces standing around her like a human fence, each facing outwards to avoid startling her. He then ordered the DJ to change to a softer song. The DJ was puzzled, but he had no choice but to obey. What's the worry about the customers being dissatisfied? Play around if you want, get out. The bar owner had no interest in serving anyone right now. What was the low customer count ruining the atmosphere? The owner quickly contacted his relatives, shaking his hips and head wildly to the soft music. "Boss, what should we serve that chick?" the bartender's younger brother asked, running over. The bartender snarled, "Show some respect and call her mom." "Do you understand?" "Repeat that." The younger brother strongly suspected his boss hadn't taken his medication for the late stage of mania, but seeing his threatening expression, he still dutifully lowered his head and said, "Yes, boss, what should we serve that chick?" This question really stumped the bar owner. A strong drink? The girl would down too, saving him some trouble, though it would be a bit harmful. If the big boss knew he was treating his target this way, would he bury him in a concrete pillar and use him as a bridge pier? This method seemed quick and easy, but in the end, it would only lead to temporary relief and a family disaster. What about a lighter drink? The bar owner felt that drinking wasn't enough, and he had to keep her company to avoid being harassed by hooligans. Thea's beauty wasn't stunning, but she was a rare gem. It was just that she was still young and hadn't fully grown yet, so she looked a little immature. America may not have many other things, but it has the most hooligans in the world. Didn't you see that the US sent 4 million cowboys to fight in World War I? To put it bluntly, they were all hooligans. Furthermore, the bar owner, considering factors like age, hair color, and facial features, concluded that this girl looked a bit like his boss. After much deliberation, He decided to show his loyalty by letting her drink slowly. He could only watch from here today. The scheduled friendly match between mistresses would have to be postponed. He also ordered his men to prepare weapons. If any idiot-proof enemies came to attack, they must be dealt with outside the door. This young lady must not be disturbed. Seeing his anxious expression, the younger brother beside him asked softly, "Boss, who is this?" Before, Thea had a very strict upbringing and had never appeared in a nightclub. How could he know who this was? Just listening to Malcolm's tone, he knew that if something happened to her, even Superman couldn't save him. Although he had some guesses in his mind, there was no need to explain to his younger brother. He said in a muffled voice, "This is my mother, oh my God." Waves rolled through the younger brother's heart. Not only did his boss suffer from mania, but his intelligence had also deteriorated. Should he go to the job market to submit a few resumes tomorrow? Unaware of the bar owner's worries, Thea drank one glass after another, his mind full of thoughts. Today's plan was very successful, and his life was completely safe. Should he consider strengthening himself next? They say the poor rely on mutations while the rich rely on technology. As the sole heir to the Quinn Corporation and one of only 2 Merlyn groups, I'm not poor by any means, but current technology isn't anywhere near Iron Man's capabilities. Malcolm's vast hidden wealth stems from martial arts training, and Batman, with all his advanced technology, still relies on flying, bang bang, fist-to-flesh combat. It seems only the Atom has gone the route of enhancing his suit, but his suit is very rudimentary, more similar to Ant-Man's, and a different style from Iron Man's Mark series. And Iron Man also practiced diligently when no one else was around. Didn't you see him in Captain America III, barehanded and without a suit? He could hold his own against the Winter Soldier. The Winter Soldier's combat prowess should be on par with his younger brother, the Green Arrow. After all these twists and turns, he still needs to practice martial arts? But training like Oliver, with scars covering 20% of his body, second-degree burns on his back and arms, and 18 fractures, simply doesn't align with Thea's current aesthetic. And according to the Flash's girlfriend, Oliver's arms are twice as thick as hers. He couldn't go down that path. Maybe he could hang out at the high-tech research lab when it exploded, and perhaps awaken some superpowers? But I remember that would require frequent deaths, and the lab is still under construction. It would be 6 years before it's finished, and my storyline has already begun a year. Maybe he just needs to focus on injecting arrows and reduce the melee? I'll ask Malcolm if he has any training methods that minimize physical changes, if he's willing to teach. Archery reminded him of Oliver. His brother should be on Purgatory Island catching birds with Yao Fei. He was just imagining things the wrong way, so he'd be facing the wall. Yao Fei was a complete idiot. He spoke Chinese to Oliver every day. Even though he spoke English well, leaving Oliver completely bewildered. His motto was survival, survival. He felt like laughing at the thought, but then he realized someone was watching him, and his smile faded into an unpleasant smirk. This scene happened to be captured by the bar owner, who was also a literary youth in his youth. In the eyes of those who were not aware of the situation, it was a runaway girl who drank one glass of wine quickly and slowly, thinking of her own worries from time to time and revealing a bitter smile. Chapter 5 Father and Daughter. Receiving the photo his subordinate sent him, Malcolm felt annoyed at the sight of Thea drinking alone. He had always subconsciously cared about this girl. From the moment she was born to the moment she laid eyes on him, he had silently watched her growth. Only today did he realize there was a reason for his inexplicable attention. He knew instantly when Moira mentioned it. No tests, no proof needed. His intuition, honed by years of life and death struggles, told him that it was his daughter. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, he gazed at the nightscape of the city. The scenery that had always filled him with endless reverie now seemed somewhat dull. He poured himself a glass of wine and gushed it down, feeling depressed and wanting to pick a fight. But looking around, he realized he was already invincible in Star City, while Green Arrow was still recovering in his dilapidated cave. How about going to Gotham City next door for some excitement? Forget it. Malcolm knew his mettle might be enough to sweep Star City, but in the simpler Gotham, he'd be a lower-tier player. And with Batman, his son-in-law, admired by even the ninja masters, there, he'd be a real nuisance. Just as he was brooding, the bar owner called. "Boss, the one you ordered is drunk." Unaware of the girl's relationship to his boss, he didn't know how to address her, so he could only vaguely refer to her as that person. Keep an eye on her. Don't let anything happen to her. Warn your men. Don't let anyone lay a finger on her. Do you understand? Malcolm barked fiercely into the phone. Yes, yes, the bar owner said, eagerly, insisting on following the Supreme Leader's orders and completing the mission. The boss's orders were easy to understand, not a single finger. The hidden subject of his words must have been directed at the man. After all, without telekinesis, how could he have teleported the girl into the room? He sent his rough-hewn men packing, as if they could pollute the air, then turned and ordered his mistresses to carry Thea to a guest room he had never used before. He told them to wait on him inside, handing out towels and pouring water, and so on. He himself moved a large chair and sat by the doorway. With a piercing gaze, he drew his pistol and examined it, like Cao sleeping in his tent, Diane Wei guarding him all night. He was quite satisfied with his men's loyalty, as Malcolm was watching from the rooftop. He knew them all too well and would regret it if something went wrong after they drank too much. He put down the phone and didn't drive. Instead, he donned a black garb of the Assassin's League, carrying a bow and arrow, and scaled the walls to protect his daughter. If anyone was blind and unprepared, he could easily kill them with one arrow. Actually, Thea wasn't completely drunk at this point, and still had some sense left. Seeing the men around her acting as if they were facing a formidable threat, and the two women carrying her into the bedroom, she felt relieved and fell into deep sleep. Ouch, my head hurts. It turns out even too much good wine can give you a headache. Thea rubbed her head and sat up, finding herself fully dressed, even her shoelaces undone. She felt a certain admiration for her cheat father's ability to control his men. Do you need anything? Two women had been inside, drowsily watching Thea set up. They quickly perked up and trotted over, ready to play their promising supporting role as a maid. Thea pointed at one of the women and said, "Get me a glass of water." The woman's face was painted like a monster, and her chest looked like it was crammed with 2 bowling balls. The stuffing was so thick it must have been by the pound. The waiter hadn't bothered to change her shoes, and the clattering sound of her high heels irritated Thea. Another waiter washed her face and combed her hair. Thea, checking that she looked alright, swaggered out of the bar. A waiter had already called a car and instructed it to go to Queen Manor. As for the night's bill, should Thea pay? She had indeed forgotten, too preoccupied with such trivial details to register. As for the bar, the owner, still waving goodbye at the door even after the car had driven 2 miles, was still there. Since they were all adults and relatively mature, no one dared to bring it up. "Oh, honey, you're finally home." Thea had barely spoken when she arrived home when a tearful Moira hugged her and refused to let her go. Her own mother was truly a contradictory person. While her hidden influence wasn't as strong as Malcolm's, the eagle wouldn't cooperate with the sparrow. And judging by her future mayoral campaign, she was well connected. She couldn't have been unaware of the fact she'd been at the bar all night, but her concern and care for her were genuine. She sighed and patted her back. "Mom, I'm fine. Leave me alone for a while. I'm going back to my room to rest." She returned to her room, changed into pajamas, and lay on the large bed. She'd been terrified at the bar, afraid she'd talk in her sleep and reveal some shocking secret, and her sleep had been restless. After a day and night of acting, whether real or fake, Yix's mental strength was a bit exhausted. Her current mission was basically completed. According to the game, that meant she had successfully unlocked Malcolm's faction reputation, and it was immediately at the adored level, completely satisfying the prerequisites for imparting skills. Next, she would enter the rapid strengthening stage. At the same time, in Central City's cutting-edge technology laboratory, Dr. Wells, also known as Albert Swan, the final boss of The Flash Season 1, walked into a secret room and said to the wall, "Gideon, have you found the target that caused the timeline shift before?" A light blue 3-dimensional humanoid image appeared on the wall, and the image mechanically said, "Doctor, the time variable affected by the target is too small. I can only vaguely sense that the target appeared in Star City. For a more specific search, you need to provide me with more computing resources." This gave Dr. Wells a headache. After all, Gideon was developed by the Flash of the future, using technology from 100 years later. The current era is a technological desert period for a future person like him. It is no less than a modern person traveling back to primitive society. It is a miracle that he can build this artificial intelligence from scratch and run it smoothly. With the current level of technology, he may have to gather scientists from all over the world to conduct research together to increase computing resources. Fortunately, the variables are not large or have hardly changed, which should not affect his plan. He sighed. He had been in this world for 10 years. Without the Speed Force, he was fed up with pretending to be this frail doctor every day. He also had to painstakingly train his nemesis, the Flash. Thinking of how far he had come as a villain, he was truly unprecedented. He instructed Gideon to follow the Star City News as usual and notify him of any changes. Dr. Wells, no longer needing to pretend to be paralyzed, quickly left the chamber. Chapter 6 Dinner. Unaware that she was being targeted by another beloved villain, Thea, under the guise of healing her inner wounds, remained at home for 3 days, outwardly gloomy but internally joyful. Using her room computer, she searched the general structure of this world. There was no Captain America, no Iron Man, no SHIELD, only Superman, Batman, and the Eye. This result gave Thea a headache. This was clearly the DC universe, and she was completely unfamiliar with it. She only remembered a plethora of parallel universes, with all sorts of messed up settings like Earth 1, Earth 2, and Earth 52. There was no coherence to this world at all. Central City, just outside her own Star City, had been practically riddled with holes by those flashes. A single brick could kill 3 visitors from the parallel universe. Even a DC screenwriter would be left scratching their heads. She sighed. She wasn't planning on saving the world anyway. She'd just be a quiet, handsome man, no, beautiful woman, watching the heroes save the world. If the sky fell, there was always Superman to hold it up, right? If Superman couldn't hold on, there was always the Flash to reload the game. She had nothing to fear. After all, she wouldn't be the only one to die if the world were to end, so she felt at peace. Thea, come with Mom to the dinner party, just keep me company, Moira said with a wry expression. Seeing the kind look in her mother's eyes, Thea felt a little sad. For the past 3 days, Moira had been constantly whispering in her ear, hoping that she would forgive her. With her careful adjustments, their relationship was gradually moving forward, or so Moira thought. She was getting a little bored after 3 days of staying indoors, so she took the opportunity to go out and see what her biological father could offer her. In the original story, after Tommy's death, Malcolm devoted himself entirely to Thea. Now Tommy was alive and well, and although he'd lost weight from being exploited by Laurel, at least he was still alive. It's impossible to care for yourself completely, but you can at least show some affection. To comfort and reassure Moira, Thea abandoned her usual androgynous outfit and gritted her teeth in a long skirt, barely above her ankles. She tried high heels, but couldn't walk properly, so she opted for flats. Fortunately, she had long legs and remained a graceful beauty. Mother and daughter arrived at the event, a typical charity dinner. Moira kept introducing various wealthy businessmen and high-ranking officials to Thea. Thea hadn't yet decided on a future career path, but money was better than nothing. Even if Oliver returned, he'd have no interest in the family business. Perhaps in his mind, his family was part of the evil. Taking over the Quinn Enterprises was a crucial task. Its weapons research and development department was comparable to Batman's Wayne Enterprises. The Atom suit was developed after acquiring the Quinn Enterprises Weapons Research and Development Department. Call it ambition or aspiration, power is power in one's own hands. Having transitioned from male to female, surely Heaven wouldn't object to receiving compensation from a company after such a significant sacrifice? Following Moira's introduction, Thea greeted everyone politely, demonstrating her good upbringing and refinement. A future assistant to Oliver's mayor would be a testament to her considerable abilities. Looking at the room full of guests, I wondered how many names were written in Green Arrow's little notebook. This notebook was quite remarkable. It was theoretically the diary of Robert Sr., Oliver's biological father and Thea's adoptive father. While it should be unique, Moira also had one, and Prometheus in Season 5 also seemed to have a list-keeping diary. Furthermore, each diary was nearly identical in size, featuring the same logo on the cover, a city government subway map. Could it be that Malcolm, for the sake of consistency, had ordered a batch of diaries from Red Star Printing Factory and given one to each member? Tragically, Oliver, believing it was a secret, had kept a shabby notebook close to his body for 5 years, only to discover at the beginning of the story that so many members had them. Just as she was lamenting about her adopted older brother, another of her real brothers came over to say hello. "Hey, Thea, you haven't been out for a few days? I heard you were sick." The only person who could greet her so unremarkably was Tommy, and he was truly not just a stranger, but a real brother. Tommy took the so-called dinner seriously. Dressed casually, with no tie and a half-open white shirt, He sauntered in, his arm linked with Laurel, who was dressed in a formal outfit, carrying a shoulder bag and a necklace. Seeing the two of them being so affectionate, oblivious to the surroundings, Thea's mind raced, and she understood. Tommy was implicitly saying he wasn't interested in her, and that she shouldn't hurt their friendship. He hoped she'd back off. Did Malcolm keep telling her the truth? Or maybe he'd been away from home, spending every day with his brother's wife? Thea wanted to grab him by the collar and yell, "Brother, you're overthinking it. I was just acting, you understand," but she couldn't say that. What expression should she make now? Now that she knew the truth, should she express regret for the feelings Tommy had assumed? Sad? Annoyed? Tommy's scalp was throbbing with worry. He watched Thea nervously, fearing she'd suffer a nervous breakdown from the shock. Luckily, there was someone understanding nearby. Laurel had grown up with Tommy Oliver, her feelings constantly wavering between them, so she was familiar with Thea as her younger sister. What she didn't realize was that no matter who she ultimately chose, Thea would still be her sister-in-law. It was truly a fascinating plot twist. He gave Thea a generous hug, easing the awkward tension. The two women exchanged a few meaningless words. Thea was a bit confused about Oliver's lifelong love, the future Black Canary, the official partner of the heroic Green Arrow. Oliver loved her so deeply, sharing a photograph for 5 years, a bond that must have been stronger than gold, right? But in those 5 years, Oliver had slept with nearly every woman he knew. Was that the right way to express true love? As for Laurel, the woman with the pointed face, Tommy had spent 5 years finally winning her over, but he hadn't expected her to be so captivated the moment Oliver returned to the city. They chatted for a moment before they had sex by the window. Before they could even draw the curtains, Tommy saw them from outside, and jealousy ripped their friendship apart. Her distant brother's charm was so overwhelming, Thea decided not to get involved. If she could save Tommy in a crucial moment, she would ensure this three-way war raged until the end of the world. Arrow couldn't stop until 18 seasons. Wouldn't it be even more exciting if Laurel's sister was dragged into the fray? A four-way war? Would Green Arrow become disheartened and decide to spend the rest of his life with Tommy? That would be disgusting. With tedious thoughts swirling in her mind, Thea said goodbye to the two and stepped aside to rest. Chapter 7 Secret Agreement. Meanwhile, in a secret room, Moira and Malcolm were engaged in a conversation, though not heated, yet certainly not dull. "Malcolm, you're actually asking Thea to run the company? You're really going crazy. She's still a child. She should be finishing high school. She should have a fulfilling life, not fighting against those people in the company," Moira protested softly. "Listen to me, okay? You don't mind that Thea is the sole heir to Quinn Enterprises, right? Do you think you're helping her by indulging her? Look at the Oliver you raised. He's a playboy, a dissolute man, and has no sense of responsibility. That's where you failed," Malcolm sternly accused her. Hearing this, Moira let out a mocking smile. "Your Tommy isn't much better." This made old Ma a little embarrassed. This wasn't just a case of the pot calling the kettle black. Oliver and Tommy were the playboys of playboys, perennially tied for the top spot on the list of promiscuous men. Oliver had been expelled from 4 schools, Tommy from 3, and neither of them had attended school since. From parties to women to ice skating, the two engaged in a fierce competition in every aspect, winning and losing for years, with no clear winner. After reflecting on his own parenting methods, he decided to put aside the question of who was the worst parent. Okay, let's put that aside for now. Sooner or later, you'll need Thea to take over. You don't object to that, do you? Of course not. I love Thea, she's my child, Malcolm said gravely. She's my child too. A pause settled over the two of them. They walked to the French window, just in time to see Tommy, Thea, and Laurel talking in the hall. Did you tell Tommy about that? Why are they still hanging out together? Moira felt uncomfortable watching the intimate conversation of the three people. Malcolm thought to himself that he hadn't seen his son since the funeral. What should he say? Send him a text message? Every protagonist has a sister. In order for a loser like you not to lose at the starting line, your father and I have found a talented sister for you. For details, please come back for a chat. The father-son relationship on his side had fallen from admiration to the current neutrality. The son's requirement for himself was to be a good ATM. I haven't had a chance to say it yet. I'm ready. He was interrupted by Moira before he finished speaking. Are you crazy? Don't you know what will happen if they continue to develop like this? Malcolm was extremely anxious. How could he not know that you are just Thea's mother and have nothing to do with Tommy? You only have 1/4 of the say here. But these two are his children, and he owns 1/2 of the shares. What if Thea does something out of revenge or the idea of destroying everything? We have all gone through the same age, and anyway, with Malcolm's current crazy mentality, if he puts himself in her shoes, he can do something even more excessive. All kinds of crazy thoughts made the big boss so anxious that he couldn't sleep at night. He could only order his men to work in 3 shifts and keep an eye on them 24 hours a day, but this is not a long-term solution. Moreover, Tommy didn't talk to him at all now, and he had no chance to explain all this. He couldn't wear black clothes and a bow and arrow to tie up his son and let him listen to stories from long ago, right? The complicated interpersonal relationships made Lao Ma a little depressed. But he continued to explain his purpose. My education was a failure, but we are both still alive, and the mistakes of young people can be corrected. I plan to let Tommy go to work at Merlyn Group in the near future, and you also let Thea join Quinn Group. We will see what the 2 young people can do. If Thea performs well, she can inherit the Merlyn Group. Huh? These words made Moira's eyes light up. It has to be said that women all have a mentality of taking advantage. When she heard that her daughter had the opportunity to inherit the Merlyn Group, the idea of Thea's high school life and a happy life was immediately abandoned. Although she also watched Tommy grow up, Moira decided to facilitate this matter for her daughter's future. After thinking about it, she said readily, "Okay, I promise you, I will go back and talk to Thea." Malcolm reminded again, "We can't provide any help. It depends on their own abilities." Moira nodded in agreement. In fact, they both felt a little uneasy inside, because neither of the 2 children seemed to have any talents. Thea was a good girl before, and her life between home and school was unremarkable. Tommy was a master at spending money, but his ability to make money was just so-so. At the same time, Malcolm felt that his son was currently unable to communicate normally. In order to avoid any major incidents, blocking his daughter's end was also a way. There were still too few things to do at Quinn Company alone, and it could only be controlled during the day. What about at night? Maybe he should find something for her to do. What? Mom, you want me to go to work at Quinn Enterprises tomorrow? I'm only 15 years old. Although Thea really wanted to inherit Quinn Enterprises, she didn't expect that she would be asked to take the position so soon. Does your country have a child labor law? And she doesn't know anything. She's just in the first year of high school. What can she do? Even if Tony Stark travels through now, he will be at a loss. Moira didn't think the idea was too good when she returned home, but she had already agreed. Moreover, compared with Tommy, she felt that her daughter had a great chance of winning. Of course, this bet, which was similar to the one between the 7 freaks of Jiangnan and Chuchuji, could not be told to her daughter. She considered her words and said, "Thea, you have grown up. This company will be yours and only yours in the future. Whether it is for your father in heaven or your brother, you must assume this responsibility as soon as possible. Don't run away. This is your destiny." In American dramas, whenever it is mentioned that this is your destiny, there must be a lot of words after it, a bit like the bond in Japanese comics. Once this word appears, it means that you can't refuse. Thea hesitated and said, "Why should I go to the company? The implication is that we're too young to get everything right the first time, but as her mother, you should at least find me a good job, right?" Moira was actually wondering, what can I possibly do at such a young age, without even a high school diploma, let alone a degree? While the Quinn Group was a family business, it did have outsider shares, just that their family held the majority. Pushing a high school student into a leadership position was clearly a move to wield power over rival news media outlets. The news coverage of their husband and son's recent deaths had just quieted down a bit. And now theirs was making headlines? The Quinn family would become a household name across the United States. She couldn't tell her daughter these concerns. Knowing her daughter, Thea would undoubtedly quit if she spoke the truth. She could only stall for a few days. Moira said sternly, "You'll know your plans in due time. I'll have my secretary show you the group's information later. Get a general overview, and tomorrow I'll take you to meet with several executives. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8 Current Status of the Group. Secretary, just like the song goes, arrives and goes just as quickly. Handing Thea a stack of documents, Moira instructed her to go back to her room and examine them carefully. Following her mother's orders, Thea returned to her room, clutching several large volumes. This was the foundation of her future life. She had to examine it carefully. She also took out her notebook and wrote down the job profiles of several key individuals, creating a simple personality profile based on their work styles. Who knew who she might assign to work tomorrow? It was always a good idea to be prepared. What? Why only a few executives? Could they be assigned to security or something? How could that be? She was the sole heir. How could her own mother assign her daughter to security? This was a transformation story, not a melodramatic urban novel about a returning soldier. She carefully analyzed the current state of the Quinn Group. The group employed over 30,000 people, with branches worldwide. Their primary business was steel smelting and non-ferrous metal mining. With a 7% share of the U.S. steel market and 4.1% of the global market, they were barely a major steel tycoon. The group has also diversified its operations, investing heavily in weapons research and biopharmaceuticals, and has achieved some success. However, the research results haven't yet translated into economic growth, and the substantial annual investment burden remains a heavy burden on the group. Flipping through the various financial reports and comparing them with last year's data, it's clear that the group has been pouring money into real estate throughout the year. Its once robust cash flow is now shrinking, a stark indicator of the state of affairs for a healthy business. Looking at a map of Star City, Thea immediately noticed that the land the group had purchased was located in the slums. Recalling the plot, it seemed as if Robert Sr. had instructed his mother to do this. He'd been secretly acquiring properties in the slums to prevent Malcolm from destroying them with a seismic device. What kind of mentality was this? Robert Sr. had known Malcolm for so many years, yet he hadn't realized that he had no moral compulsion to act. He was hoping, I own the land, and we're good friends, so you won't take action. How could this be possible? Malcolm didn't attack those lands, he simply killed them. Malcolm wasn't mentioned in the notebook that Robert passed to Oliver. He never realized, even to his death, that his longtime friend would harm him. If he had warned Oliver in advance, Season 1 could have been a single episode, not 23. Looking at the dense pile of land purchase documents, Thea felt a headache. 6 years later, Malcolm attempted to emulate Whitebird's battle against Marineford, but the earthquake destroyed most of the slums, leaving all the land in his hands. Star City was a city plagued by disasters. In the first year, Malcolm unleashed his earthquake, killing over 500 people despite Green Arrow's desperate efforts to stop him, including his own son, Tommy. The following year, Deathstroke led hundreds of evolved soldiers into a live-action Dota game on the streets, leaving rivers of blood. In the third year, the Ninja Master conducted a biohazard drill and unleashed a viral attack. In the fourth year, some magician brought over 15,000 nuclear bombs as Christmas gifts, poised to destroy the world. In such a place of exceptional talent and natural beauty, buying all this land and hoping to escape poverty and achieve prosperity would require a miracle. Sia, pen in hand, pored over the spreadsheets, growing increasingly desperate. The land purchases hadn't stopped with old Robert's death. In just the 2 weeks since she'd traveled here, she'd already bought 3 more plots. It seemed her mother was faithfully carrying out her late husband's wishes, but this was a dead end. This meant the Quinn Group would continue pouring money into this mess for years to come. It was only because she had lost some organs that she'd be utterly mortified. No wonder Ray Palmer, the Atom, easily acquired the Quinn Group in Season 3. Despite such desperate efforts, he managed to hold on for 8 years. 8 years. The group was incredibly well funded, but it was all their own money being squandered. To ensure that future Green Arrows wouldn't be left to feed their girlfriends, and to prevent herself from having to work a promising security job, this policy had to be reversed. This was easier said than done. Her influence was limited. She couldn't claim that her father, Pulse, would cause the land to move with him if he drank too much. No one would believe her. She could only hope to reverse the company's decisions once she reached a higher position. As for stopping her father's actions, Thea had considered it. Perhaps she could prevent the crisis in the first year with their relationship, but what about the second? The third? Too many unpredictable circumstances existed, and she wasn't invincible yet. With 5 years left before the story began, she had to take it one step at a time. The next day, Thea rose early and applied light makeup. Fortunately, her abilities were still there, relying primarily on her original soul, supplemented by her transmigrated soul. Looking at the outfits in front of her, she felt a bit torn. After all, it was her first day at work, so she had to dress formally. She chose a short beige blazer and paired it with a navy straight skirt. The skirt wasn't too long, but not too short, just barely reaching the knees. It made her look less immature and more sophisticated. She chose a pair of black heels, less than 5 centimeters high, and took a few test steps. Thea felt relatively stable. The initial discomfort had subsided considerably, and Thea's sense of control was growing stronger. She looked in the mirror and decided this was the outfit she wanted. Moira had been waiting for a while when she arrived downstairs. She knew her daughter well. Thea's personality was, to put it mildly, fickle, but to put it bluntly, she would retreat if you pushed her. The more you told her not to do something, the more she would do it. She had expected Thea to resist her plans and was trying to figure out how to persuade her. But when she saw her daughter come downstairs, dressed in formal attire and looking calm, without any scissors or gasoline bottles, she knew she was complying with her plans, which pleased her. The two got on the car, and Thea kept asking about the current situation of the group. After all, some things could not be put on paper. This made Moira even happier. What did this mean? The fact that her daughter could ask questions showed that she had carefully read the information. If she asked Oliver, he would not even know which way the door of his own group opened. In order to make up for her coldness to her mother during the previous few days, Thea also deliberately acted more intimate. When they arrived at the door of the group, Moira was already grinning from ear to ear. Her 2 children had made her unhappy for the past 20 years. One only knew how to get into trouble and the other was very cold to her. She was finally able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Although her son died, her daughter became sensible, which was also a kind of comfort to her. Moira was in a good mood and looked forward to the competition between the 2 families in Jiaxing. No, it was more than the competition of ability. She pulled Thea into the door of the group. Chapter 9, Confrontation at a Meeting. Entering the conference room, there were about a dozen people seated. The middle chair was empty. Sitting at the head of the left-hand column was Walter Steele, a black man whom she had met at the funeral. He would marry Moira and become Thea's stepfather. He didn't know if there was a concept of marrying into the family in Europe and America, but he would be living in the Quinn mansion with his mother and daughter for the next few years. It was a bit strange to describe a black man as gentle as jade, but the man was indeed exceptionally graceful, giving Thea an encouraging look, as if he were looking at a junior. Although this was their company, it wasn't theirs yet. Since Thea had come to pay her respects today, she couldn't keep a cold face. She nodded and greeted the black man's overtures. Mr. Steele, nice to meet you, please call me Walter. Welcome to the group. Walter was somewhat flattered by Thea's politeness. He had always kept a distance from everyone except old Robert, and normal conversations like this had only occurred in very private settings. Moira was now filled with joy. It was a good start that her daughter could communicate normally with her boyfriend. She'd been avoiding Walter lately, fearing his elusive daughter might witness something she shouldn't have seen and suffer a complete breakdown. After all, a 15-year-old girl, still recovering from the recent death of her father and brother, was still reeling from the shock. And then you told her it wasn't her father who died, but someone else's. And then, 2 days later, you told her your mother was looking for a stepfather. Such a chaotic relationship would drive anyone insane, wouldn't it? Moira felt like if she were in her daughter's shoes, she'd be in Arkham Asylum next door. But seeing Thea's resilience now, could it really be Malcolm's genes that endowed her with extraordinary resilience? He then introduced everyone in the room to her daughter. This was someone from the administration department. This was someone from the finance department. After a round of introductions, Thea realized Walter was still the company's vice president. She'd supposedly taken over as president, with her mother in charge of finance. Was she mistaken, or had history shifted? Soon, Thea received her new position as assistant to the CEO, better known as a secretary, whose CEO was none other than her mother. She wasn't mistaken, the plot had indeed undergone a minor twist. Moira and Walter's relationship had been rapidly developing, from colleagues to friends to boyfriends to marriage, escalating rapidly, even to flash marriage when they were nearly 80 years old. Seeing the situation was irreconcilable, the board approved Walter's appointment as CEO. However, since Thea's father had exposed the scheme, Moira had been spending time with her daughter, forcing her boyfriend to step aside. Their relationship hadn't reached that point yet, and she didn't want to place her beautiful daughter with her mother's boyfriend-to-be. Her family was already turbulent enough, so there was no need to further complicate matters. After weighing the pros and cons, Moira decided to take on the CEO role while also nurturing her daughter. Honestly, she had no interest in the position, but for her daughter's sake, she had no choice but to continue. The following meeting was dull and uninteresting. This department wanted a raise, that department wanted layoffs. While not trivial, it was still the mundane business of the group. Moira kept a close eye on Thea, afraid she'd get bored and do something like yawning or picking her nails. To her surprise, her daughter sat at attention, listening to the executive's speeches without a trace of impatience, constantly jotting down notes in her notebook. My daughter is growing up, Moira felt incredibly happy, even as she felt a certain resemblance to herself. The meeting lasted an hour, and Moira concluded, declaring it a success and a triumph. She hoped everyone would continue to shine for the company, and everyone could bow down. Just as she was about to serve tea and send them off, a middle-aged man with a sly look on his face said, "Ms. Quinn, since this is your first meeting, what are your thoughts, Alice?" Thea immediately realized that this man had a problem with her mother, or rather, with the Quinn family. What could a newcomer like her have to say? If you are right, people will say you are arrogant. If you are wrong, you will just be a laughingstock. This is bullying yourself because you are young and don't understand these workplace traps. Mr. Andre, I am new here and I don't know anything about the company. I can't even make ordinary suggestions, let alone brilliant ideas. Are you kidding me? Shia replied politely. Unexpectedly, the little girl of the Quinn family didn't fall for it. This is much better than her dandy brother. The man with a weasel-like face was still a little unwilling to give up. He continued, "It's okay, just talking casually. We are all your father's old subordinates and are considered your elders. No one will laugh at you." After that, he laughed to show that he was very open-minded. "Damn it, what do you mean no one will laugh at you? I haven't said anything yet, and you define it as a joke." Shia was furious. Flipping through her notes, she realized this grandson was the director of the weapons development department she'd been coveting for so long. Old Robert's judgment was truly poor. This guy clearly harbored resentment towards the company, and he'd kept him for 3 years. The weapons development department was too important to her future, she had to get rid of him. Mr. Andre, I don't really have any suggestions for the company, but I have a question I'd appreciate your help with, Thea said slowly. Go ahead, your report just now mentioned increasing the group's investment in weapons development, right? I've looked at the group's investment in weapons development over the past few years, and it's been increasing month over month, with each year increasing by about 20% over the previous year. Why is this number so coincidental? Hearing this question, the man named Andre breathed a sigh of relief. There's scientific evidence to support this. The 20% increase is just a coincidence. I've explained it to the vice president. The implication was that this was complicated, and he was afraid she wouldn't understand. Walter nodded, indicating that he understood the matter. Shia was very calm. This was within her expectations. Mr. Andre has been in charge of the Weapons Research and Development Department 3 years ago, but in the research and development reports of these 3 years, 19 technologies were applied for in 2004, 12 in 2005, and 17 in 2006. Has the strength of our technical personnel fluctuated greatly? Andre had a premonition of what she was going to say, but when the conversation came to this point, he could only force himself to say, yes, there are big fluctuations. This is how scientific and technological research is, Shia chuckled. This G-12 anti-gravity suit applied for in 2005 is a special suit for high overload protection. Why is it that something that was clearly completed 2 years ago is mixed in with a large number of research projects in your report just now and requires group funding for research? Can you explain why? Chapter 10. Someone will take care of him. How could he explain himself? Andre, the middle-aged man, felt a sweat forming on his forehead. Honestly, he'd just been swindling some research funding and enjoying a few drinks, but seeing everyone in the room staring intently at him, they surely wouldn't believe him. He'd been doing this for years, picking out a few names that made people dizzy and adding them to his reports. Since these CEOs weren't tech-savvy, they'd just submit the list at the end of the year and the job was done. He hadn't expected Thea to have been ogling those weapons for days. She'd already read the Quinn Group's weapons and equipment catalog 3 times. Even though the mention of this project was only smuggled in, Thea had noticed it instantly. She'd planned to report him privately after the meeting, but he'd jump in on her own accord. He was filled with regret, but still clinging to a glimmer of hope. He hesitated, saying, "It could be a coincidence. Maybe someone down there made a mistake, or maybe it was an upgrade. I'll investigate thoroughly when I get back. Now you're scared. Where's that time you mocked me?" How could Thea let him off so easily? She pulled a piece of paper from her bag and waved it. "This is the index report for the MTG suit. I downloaded it from our intranet. Can I see your computer?" According to regulations, all projects reported to the group's former supervisor require a forward-looking plan. "Let's compare your plan with the indexes on this report and everything will be clear." The middle-aged man named Andre felt like banging his head against the wall. Hadn't this girl just announced she wanted to join the company yesterday? How did she know so much about the process? What did her initial plan look like? Could I show it to them? He thought for a moment and realized it looked like she'd copied it verbatim. The evidence on the computer was enough to get him 10 years in prison. Imagine yourself clutching the bars and singing, "10 years from now, we'll still be friends and can still exchange greetings," but that tenderness will no longer find a reason to embrace. The image was too strong. He wouldn't let them see his computer, even if he killed himself. But he had no clear reason to refuse. Seeing Moira staring at him with a smile from the main seat, he could only wink, hoping she'd spare him a moment for past merit. Then, the voices of accusations from the people around him began to rise. "Miss Quinn is right, Andre. We need to see your computer. Andre, you're a scoundrel in the group. I've known about your problems for a long time. You still refuse to plead guilty? My uncle's great-uncle's neighbor works for the Star City Police Department, and I've reported him." Suddenly, the solemn meeting room transformed into a market, with everyone, whether Moira is a liar or not, accusing Andre of his self-serving behavior. "The Quinn family is so wealthy, no one would mind if you stole a few, at least not except for the mother and daughter. Walter is so loyal, and with the nourishment of love, he even has investment companies outside. Who wouldn't have some selfish motives? But you, Andre, did such a mediocre job that being exposed by a 15-year-old girl would go down in history. It's embarrassing for even the self-proclaimed smart managers. Your individual behavior has lowered the overall intelligence level. What if anyone in this room were to take a job at another group? Once they hear they worked with you and remember your glorious achievements today, they wouldn't dare hire us. This behavior must be condemned." Suddenly, the instigator was the target of widespread criticism. Thea, the instigator, smiled and rubbed his chin, then realized he couldn't grow a beard. With a hint of frustration, he turned to look at Moira. Noticing his mother looking back, he immediately understood she was venting her anger and waiting for him to speak. Not wanting to make her first day look awkward, Thea nodded gently, indicating that the matter could be put behind her. Moira was initially furious. She had already made advance arrangements the day before, and since she was young and on her first day, she felt obliged to give her some respect. She knew her subordinates were capable of the most serious actions, but she hadn't taken any action due to lack of evidence or the wrong timing. Besides, the replacements might be even more greedy. She had been trying to turn a blind eye, believing that nothing would go too far, and that would be all for the better. Whether the Quinn family's assets were 100 million or 101 million didn't really matter. She knew none of them were as wealthy as she was, but the only prerequisite was that they stayed within certain boundaries. Andre's actions today clearly crossed a line. Just as she was about to stop this incident to protect her daughter, Thea surprisingly defuses the situation with ease, launching a brilliant counterattack. This made her wonder, had she never realized her daughter was actually a management genius? She'd just given the information yesterday, and today, she'd used it to bring down a supervisor, a talent she didn't possess in her youth. To vent her anger and provide support for her daughter, she simply ignored Andre's pleading gaze. Only after Thea nodded, indicating she'd let the matter go, did she slowly say, "That concludes the meeting today. We're adjourning now." She didn't even mention Andre's opinion on how to handle the situation. For one thing, this person was recommended by another shareholder, making it difficult for her to handle the situation. For another, Thea was Malcolm's biological daughter. With Malcolm's "if you take a piece of my scallion, I'll kill your whole family," she was doomed. There was no need for further discussion. Moira's suspicions about her former lover proved to be completely correct. Malcolm was an underground emperor, a figurehead with a powerful army, and the city was filled with his minions. Moreover, at a company as large as Quinn Enterprises, he had infiltrated a third of the dozen or so executives, either through threats or bribery. He had full access to the entire meeting, having watched it on video. He was delighted to see his daughter emerge from her gloom and enter the meeting room with a composed demeanor. Her subsequent behavior was nothing short of a surprise. Thea's composure, generosity, wit, and measured manners reminded him of his younger self, albeit a female one. Fortunately, Europeans and Americans don't favor male superiority over females. The Queen of England and the Queen of the Netherlands are both women, and there are countless duchesses and countesses, so gender isn't an issue. He wasn't anxious when he saw Moira had so easily let go of the culprit who had angered his daughter. He had already instructed his younger brother to find a viaduct under construction for Mr. Andre. The future piers were tall and sturdy, offering excellent load-bearing capacity. The area was bustling with people, and he wouldn't charge him a lodging fee, believing he wouldn't feel lonely staying there that night. Not to mention Mr. Andre, who will soon become the American TV version of Jinchuriki. Watching his daughter's performance was truly outstanding. As the saying goes, there's no harm without comparison, but comparing his excellent daughter to the son he raised was a real bummer. Tommy didn't answer his calls, he didn't see him in person, and he ignored his texts. In the promised competition, his daughter had already run 200 meters, while his son hadn't even reached the starting line. Even the conspirator Malcolm was at a loss as to what to do. Chapter 11 Tommy's Troubles. Tommy had been very happy these past few days without Thea's harassment. His relationship with Laurel was progressing rapidly, and their physical connection was gradually evolving into an emotional one. That's the Western worldview, sex first, then relationships. It's a bit like buying a computer, looking at the hardware first and then the software. The software can be modified later, but if the hardware isn't good, then it's truly bad. Life isn't always happy, and Tommy naturally had his troubles. His dad, for some reason, kept calling him and harassing him. Yesterday, he even texted him to work at his company. He was talking about competing with Thea, but what was he competing for? If he were going to Quinn Enterprises or Thea was going to Merlyn, it would make sense. Now that everyone's gone their separate ways, looking after their parents, how could that be competition? After reading the text, Tommy was convinced that his dad's paranoia had reached an advanced stage, that he couldn't even grasp basic logic. That day, Tommy and Laurel finished their meal, and Tommy handsomely tossed his credit card away, preparing to go back for some exercise. Soon, the waiter returned, bowing, "Sir, please give me cash." "What's wrong? I always eat here, why are you asking for cash today?" Tommy, ever the good-natured man, asked gently, even though a little embarrassed by his girlfriend's gaze. The waiter, not wanting to offend this regular customer who never asked about prices, yet was a major patron of his restaurant, bowed and said, "Your credit card is blocked. How about you give me another one?" He tried 3 different cards, but nothing came through, proving they were all blocked. Knowing it must be his father's fault, Tommy swiped his face and promised to pay next time. After dropping Laurel off at her apartment, Tommy, no longer in the mood for exercise, told her to just do some yoga. He stormed back home, his first visit in a month. Malcolm, dressed in loose, wide-sleeved samurai attire, sat on the floor. 2 teacups and a teapot sat on a small table before him, and a large Zen character was inscribed on the wall behind him. He hoped his sentiment would calm Tommy's heart and make him listen patiently to his story. His actions proved to be nothing more than a flirtation with the blind. Tommy hadn't even finished elementary school when he and Oliver both dropped out to compete in nightclubs for who was the most promiscuous. Tommy hadn't even learned a single English word, and it was a wonder he could even recognize the complex Chinese characters and written so flamboyantly. Seeing his father sitting there motionless, silent and with his eyes closed, Tommy was terrified. He reached out to check for breath, hoping to confirm whether to call a doctor or a lawyer. Understanding his purpose, Malcolm, infuriated by his actions, lost interest in his story. He said stiffly, "Go to work at Merlyn Group tomorrow," and stormed out, ignoring Tommy's vehement protests. Despite his failed negotiations, Tommy knew he was powerless. His relationship with Laurel had just begun to blossom, and while the loss of financial support wouldn't significantly impact their relationship, Laurel was ambitiously planning her own law firm, and with his education, the only way he could help was financially. Despite his preparedness, hoping to perform well enough to get his father's allowance back, Tommy still overslept the next day and arrived at Merlyn Group at 10 o'clock. He couldn't afford to spend much at night, and he had no morning routine, so his body clock wasn't easily adjusted. Malcolm didn't make any unreasonable demands, offering Tommy the same position as at Quinn Group. It was fair to assign Tommy a lower position, as he was 6 years older than Thea and a man, but Malcolm was no longer able to care. According to insiders, Thea had essentially mastered the group's middle and senior management in just 3 days, remembering everyone's name, hometown, and alumni school, and could even engage in conversation about topics of interest. Yesterday, a mid-level executive had a birthday, and she even sent gifts on behalf of the group. This morning, she proposed a proposal for a more humane office environment. Almost no one would object to this kind of proposal, as there's no reason to disagree. Regardless, everyone on the live video feed sent to Malcolm by the insider expressed support for the idea. Several of Malcolm's HR experts, without knowing Thea's background, gave her high marks. Her only weakness at the moment is her young age. While her education doesn't necessarily matter, it's not significant. Many entrepreneurs in Europe and America have dropped out of college to start their own companies. Didn't you see Tommy, who didn't even finish elementary school, get a job? Compared to him, Thea's high school education is considered a high level of education. Looking at the comments from his subordinates, they described her as smart, resourceful, and able to capitalize on her strengths. There was practically no negative word to say. Malcolm, both proud of his daughter's achievements and worried about his son's lackluster performance, checked the group's surveillance cameras to see what his son was doing. After searching for 10 minutes, he found Tommy happily chatting with the receptionist. Furious, she quickly took out a handful of quick-acting heart pills, secretly resenting Oliver, who seemed dead but was actually alive. Her son had been so honest as a child, and it was all that guy who had led him astray. He had informants at the Quinn Group, and Moira had connections at Merlyn as well. Tommy's first day's performance was relayed to her desk without a trace. Compared to the daughters of several branch managers, who were video chatting outside the CEO's office, Moira felt she had already won the competition, hands down. Seeing Tommy's frivolous behavior, her mother automatically assumed it was Tommy who had led Oliver astray, remembering how well behaved he had been as a child. Meanwhile, far away on Purgatory Island in South China, Oliver sneezed loudly, unaware that someone was thinking about him. Focus. You have to learn how to survive. Do you understand? Yao Fei, with his long beard and scraggly hair, was leading Oliver through the jungle. They had been together for over a month, and Yao Fei had already begun speaking English. Somehow, this old man had a profound ambition to correct Oliver's frivolous ways and groom him to be his successor. His teaching methods were primitive, beatings. Green Arrow's martial arts skills were largely memorized, acquired through beatings from his own enemies, including beatings while tied to stools and beaten on tables. He had very little time for systematic learning. After a long discussion, they managed to catch a bird for breakfast. Yao Fei continued to teach Oliver archery. But Oliver, still believing that archery was a ridiculous feat for a modern man, was psychologically resistant. While he didn't outright refuse to learn, he was afraid. His success was disappointing. Yao Fei's own daughter was very well behaved and had never encountered such a stubborn person before. With no other options, he could only continue beating her with a stick until she mastered the art. Chapter 12, Changing Vests to Teach. Unaware that his best friend was in the jungle of Purgatory, being brutally beaten by the demon Yao Fei, Tommy knew only that his day had been awful. Perhaps inspired by Thea's story, Malcolm wanted to test his son's problem-solving skills, so he kept sending his men to Tommy with documents. Assistant, the president wants you to review this document and give your comments. Assistant, this is the appropriation for next year. Remember to report to the financial director after you've reviewed it. Assistant, one of our employees has been detained by the police, and the legal department is asking if bail is required. Tommy was completely overwhelmed by the myriad of questions. Why were there so many problems in his group? How did he usually handle them? Shouldn't the responsible party be the one to be contacted? He gritted his teeth and got to work. Reporting to the president? Wasn't it his own father? He was too lazy to see him, so he put it off until last. Financial appropriations? He picked it up and flipped through it. There were 15 pages, and Tommy almost fell asleep before he finished the first. He washed his face, found the bail document, and prepared to handle it himself. On the one hand, he wanted to get some fresh air. On the other hand, Detective Lance was Laurel's biological father, and he was also Laurel's future son-in-law, making this the easiest thing to do. At the police station, there was no scene of the father-in-law and son-in-law crying. Detective Lance had no intention of using any back doors. Seeing Tommy reminded him of Oliver, who had seduced his youngest daughter and perished at the bottom of the sea, though his daughter was still alive. He had no regard for this playboy who was now seducing his eldest daughter. Forget bail. If he hadn't been so honest, he would have almost arrested Tommy. All in all, it was a very gloomy day for Tommy. Malcolm, knowing his son's plight, didn't lose heart. He set a small goal for himself. After all, he had his own dirty money and didn't care much about the group, so he wasn't afraid of losing money. He would endure it for a month to see how far his son could go. At the same time, he got up to test his daughter's courage. Tommy hadn't been having a good time, but Thea had been quite exhausted these past 2 days, too. The fusion of their souls had greatly improved her memory and mental strength. Learning things was much faster than in the original story, but the sheer volume and complexity of the company's tasks was a bit unexpected. Even Thea 2.0 could barely manage it. This was where Moira's ruthless side came into play. Although she loved her daughter, she also wanted to test her abilities, so she assigned tasks that were 3 times the size of hers. Thea, a newcomer, was able to exceed her expectations, which made her love her even more. Walking down a small road with 2 bodyguards, Thea had just returned from a branch office in Star City. Since it was close to home, she had skipped the car and was thinking about the things she needed to deal with tomorrow. Suddenly, she felt like she was being watched. The silence was unbearable. She immediately noticed something was wrong up ahead and whispered, "Hold." She told her bodyguard to check out a tree ahead. Malcolm, clad in black and armed with a bow and arrow, was horrified. He'd learned his hiding skills from a ninja master. To say they were honed was a stretch. Did you see the 2 special forces bodyguards hadn't noticed at all? Being spotted by the little girl only meant she had a natural psychic sense, surpassing a special forces soldier without training. She'd only ever heard of one person possessing such a skill, Ms. Shiva, the world's #1 assassin, who had trained with a ninja master. In this timeline, Prometheus hadn't yet appeared, so Shiva still held the undefeated record. His daughter was truly remarkable. Malcolm threw 2 darts, knocking the bodyguard unconscious. He activated his voice changer and emerged from behind a tree. He was ready to test his daughter's courage. After all, talent is useless without a strong character. With 2 puffs, Thea suddenly saw the bodyguard fall to the ground. A figure in black emerged from behind the tree, startling her. Someone from the League of Assassins? But a closer look revealed her own cheap dad. "I've seen the TV show. I'd recognize you even in that vest." What's he planning? She knew his identity but couldn't reveal it, couldn't go up and say hello. "Hey, Dad, have you eaten?" Thea pretended not to know who he was, calmly asking, "Who are you?" "It doesn't matter who I am. Do you know how much your life is worth?" Malcolm's voice came out hoarsely through the voice changer. "This voice changer is really a treasure. I have to get one someday. As far as I know, except for Superman, who doesn't even wear a mask, almost every hero and villain has one. I don't know if it's expensive, but my pocket money is not much." But seeing that Malcolm was still waiting for her to respond, she thought for a moment and said, "I can sense that you have no malicious intent, at least no murderous intent." Yes, she had some impression of most heroes and villains. As long as she found the name, she could identify them. This cheat was unique to her, and it was the easiest to judge whether it was good intentions or bad intentions. "You're a very clever child. You're quite good. What's your wish?" What a silly question. From his attire, Thea suspected he was here to teach her some skills. He'd changed his disguise to maintain the illusion that Malcolm didn't know martial arts, so he'd adopted a different look. She'd been waiting for this moment for over a month, and she answered aloud, "I need strength. To protect my family, to protect myself. It's so hard for a woman in this world. I need great strength." This answer, informed by Thea's own experience with the loss of his wife, had a different ring to Malcolm's ears. In that moment, he felt his daughter resembled him so much, even their thoughts were so similar, almost identical. If he'd had that same awareness when he was younger, his wife might not have died. He had one last question. He wanted to confirm that Thea could do the same, abandoning their young children and their company in pursuit of power. Power requires learning. Would you give up your wealth for it? I heard you've been doing great at the company this month, even garnering widespread praise. Can you give it up?" Hearing this, Thea curled her lips inwardly. "The company will eventually belong to us. I've been working so hard these past few days just to get your attention. Do you really think I'm here to liberate your productive forces, develop them, and promote spiritual civilization?" But this question couldn't be answered with a definitive answer immediately. That would sound a bit hypocritical. So Thea hesitated and said, "Money can be transformed into power, but I need my own strength even more. I'm too fragile. A bullet, a knife, can take everything from me. I must change this situation." Malcolm's wife was gunned down while providing free medical care in the ghetto, murdered for a few $100s. Batman's parents had the same experience. A billionaire was murdered for a few $100s. This is the reality of the ghetto. Call them short-sighted or ignorant, but they've certainly harmed many wealthy people who wanted to help the poor. If the wealthy with conscience have been killed, then surely all the remaining wealthy are villains. Hearing his daughter's answer and comparing it with his deceased wife's experience, Malcolm's heart was pounding wildly and he could hardly control his emotions. He left a sentence, "Come here tomorrow and I'll teach you," and turned around and ran away. Chapter 13. The past is like smoke. Unaware of her father's tantrum, Thea felt her answers were generally to his liking. After all, it was just a few questions, and she'd been mulling over them for a month, so her answers should be perfect. As for why he'd turned and run, perhaps it was to maintain a certain air of mystery. She called home and asked them to pick her up and remove the 2 bodyguards sleeping on the floor. She'd have to replace them next time. With such poor skills, how could she possibly survive without learning martial arts? Unaware that her words had inflicted at least 1,000 points of damage on her father, Thea ran off to a distance and removed her mask. Malcolm gasped for air, remembering his youthful ambition and the phone call his late wife had made before her death. Tears streamed uncontrollably. Back then, he'd only cared about making money, believing it would buy him everything. If he'd had Thea's perspective, his wife wouldn't have left him. He stumbled back to the Merlyn mansion and locked himself in his room, clutching his wife's photo album, spending the night in silence. After daybreak, he checked with the housekeeper and learned Tommy still hadn't returned. He was too lazy to bother with him now, so he decided to leave him alone for a while. He pulled a box from the bedroom safe and shoved it into his arms. He got in the car and told the driver, "Go to Quinn Group." He didn't ask for directions when he arrived, but after a few detours, he found Thea. He knew this place better than his own company, watching short videos every day. "Hey, Thea," Malcolm said softly as he approached. Thea, buried in a document at her desk, heard someone enter and ignored them, assuming it was someone working. But then she realized the voice wasn't right and looked up, noticing the middle-aged man staring at her intensely. "Why are you here?" Even though they had just met the previous night, he assumed he didn't know, and he had to pretend not to know. This was likely their first meeting since their background was exposed that day, at least under the pseudonym. "Would you go out for coffee with me? I'd love to have a good chat," Malcolm said earnestly. Thea also wanted to talk, to see if she could ease his hatred for the slums. Perhaps a little more soothing would save her from a heated confrontation with Oliver. A brother and a father were both close relatives. They nodded, and they left the building, found a cafe, ordered 2 drinks, and began a long conversation. "Kid, you know, you're so much like my wife, same intelligence, youthful energy. It's so funny, I almost suspect you're my wife's biological son, and Tommy is Moira's. You look so much like her." Malcolm spoke seriously, looking Thea in the eye. Thea thought, "You're just kidding." Last night's conversation must have had some effect on him, making him feel a certain fusion of his late wife's. "It's a bit of a blessing in disguise. That's not what you said in the original story. You said I was a natural warrior. Listen to that. Is that what a father says to his daughter? What a terrible conversationalist. No wonder he's been single since his wife died. Can you tell me about her? I've only seen her picture from Tommy. Playing to someone's heart was definitely the right thing to do. Anyway, Thea wasn't bothered going back to work today, and Moira had plenty of eyes and ears, so she should know the reason. We both had nothing to do, and it was work hours, so the cafe wasn't crowded. So let's talk. We met on the train. Malcolm hadn't spoken these words since his wife's death. It was rare for someone to listen today, so he unloaded everything from their first meeting. He didn't think much of the illogicality of discussing his wife with his illegitimate daughter. She was running a free clinic in the ghetto, and on her way home from get off work, She was robbed by a homeless man. There was no grudge, just for a few $100s. She collapsed in a pool of blood and called me 3 times for help, but I was so upset I didn't answer. I had planned to pick her up that day. I hate myself. Malcolm slammed the coffee table as he spoke, clearly holding this matter in his heart for a long time. Thea felt a certain empathy. Was Tommy's mother a good person? She was definitely a good person, but fate had played a trick on her. If she had had the strength, this wouldn't have happened. Thea felt more and more certain that she had chosen the right path. Living in this chaotic world was too difficult for women. They had to have the strength to protect themselves. She gently patted Malcolm's hand. "She's so kind. I'm sure she'll forgive you, Dad." Her voice was soft as a mosquito's buzz. She was not used to it, but she still felt the need to comfort him, seeing him in so much pain. Malcolm was also deeply shocked by the words. The ecstasy on his face lingered for a moment, but then quickly faded. He stroked Thea's hair. "Child, I know you're sympathizing with me. It's okay. I'm happy you acknowledged me. You don't need to acknowledge me as your father. You will always be Thea Quinn. There are your family, your friends, and everything that belongs to you. I will only silently support and protect you from behind. I won't let anyone hurt you." These words resonated with Thea. If she changed her last name to Merlyn, she would lose her inheritance rights to the Quinn group and would have to fight Tommy for the inheritance. It was too much trouble. Right now, it was best for each child to have a family. She didn't even know about the agreement between the two unscrupulous parents. Malcolm took out a box and placed it in Thea's hand. "This is something I gave to my wife. I'm giving it to you today. May its light continue to guide us forward," he finished, then stood up and left the cafe. Thea opened the box and found a remarkably delicate necklace. A sky blue gem hung from a silver chain. As the gem swayed, a soft, lake-like light shimmered. Inside the chain were several inscriptions, but Thea didn't recognize a single word. It didn't seem modern. She'd planned to persuade Malcolm to let go of the ghetto, but he'd left before even touching on it. He seemed to be consciously avoiding the subject. This was a knot in his stomach. How could she help him? Perhaps she should ask Batman? His story was very similar to Malcolm's, except that he'd lost both his parents at a young age, and ultimately, through a profound emotional journey, he let go of his hatred. After a moment's reflection, she quickly abandoned the idea. Batman was too brilliant, yet too dark. He claimed to be able to defeat 90% of heroes and villains with his intellect and technological weaponry. Yes, even heroes of justice were wary of him. With so many secrets to keep, she thought she'd better stay away from him. Was the only way to slowly influence him through family affection? There are less than 6 years left. At this moment, Malcolm is no longer a big boss in Thea's heart, but just a poor man who is avenging his deceased wife. Chapter 14, First Encounter with Felicity. My mood had suddenly taken a toll, and I felt too lazy to go back to work. I picked up the phone and called my mother. "Mom, I'm going out to relax and not be back." "Thea, did he say something to you? Are you okay?" Moira asked anxiously. "I'm fine. We had a great talk, haha," Thea said, laughing down the phone. It was actually going well, but she wanted to let Moira know she was worried, so she just wanted to let her know. "Honey, no matter what you decide, know that I'll always support you." "Thank you, Mom." After hanging up, Thea sighed. Her parents weren't considered good people by the world, but they were truly incredible to her. In the future, she would protect them no matter the cost. She had agreed to take martial arts lessons with Malcolm that evening, and since it was still early in the morning, Thea decided to go to the library to read a book and learn more about the world. She stood up and was about to leave when a pink figure bumped into her. "Ouch, who's that?" There was a coffee table behind Thea, so she was able to sit back down after the collision, and it wasn't a big deal. The other person she'd bumped into wasn't so lucky. Sitting right in front of her was a woman wearing a pink dress, a beige jacket, blonde hair, and square glasses. She was dazed, still unsure of what was happening, staring blankly at Thea. She looked familiar, the hair color, the expression, and most importantly, she was wearing a Quinn Enterprise badge with her name on it. She was a character she'd been very fond of in her past life. She looked so beautiful with the glasses, no wonder she captivated the 3 heroes, Green Arrow, the Flash, and the Atom. Thea crossed her shoulders and said, feigning a cool demeanor, "Miss Felicity Smoke, can you tell me why you're here during work hours?" She gestured around. The blonde, Felicity, was speechless. Coffee? No, I'm here to write a report. Yes, a report. It was interesting to listen to her talk. She looked goofy, but she was actually quite capable, one of the future Green Arrow trio and a world-class hacker. But now she's turned over a new leaf and is working for the Quinn Group. Who are you writing this report for? Let me ask, Thea teased, pulling out her phone. Felicity, bewildered by her insistent questioning, darted her pretty eyes around, trying to come up with a name so she could hack together a command. Suddenly realizing why she needed to answer, "Who is this person?" she demanded. "Who are you? Why should I explain myself to you, huh?" This person didn't recognize her. It seemed there were corners of the group she hadn't seen. She must have been hiding somewhere sleeping while he was on patrol. He pulled his ID from his bag and showed it to her. "Thea Quinn? Who's this?" "Hey," he yelled, drawing the attention of the cafe waiter. Thea nearly fainted. She was so startled, even someone with a heart condition couldn't work with her. "Did I call you?" "Okay, I did." "Are you the lady from the Quinn family?" Felicity said, covering her mouth in disbelief. Thea nodded, indicating it was her. Felicity, still a little unconvinced, pulled out her personal computer, spun around, turned the interface around, pointed at the image, and said, "Is that you? I've always thought this photo was very well taken, very beautiful." Thea looked down at the image. It was a photo. The setting looked familiar. It looked like a photo of herself acting and getting drunk at a bar a few days ago. Who took this photo? The angle was pretty good, perfectly blending my natural beauty with my melancholy. It was really good. But you're so brazenly hacking it from a server right in front of me. That's not right. Miss Smoke, where did you get this photo? I found it in the newspaper, the blunt Felicity said, realizing she was about to get into trouble. She frantically explained, pointing her finger everywhere, as if Thea's photo was plastered all over the street. "Miss Felicity Smoke, you placed second at the National Information Technology Competition at just 19, and you earned a master's degree in cybersecurity and computer science from MIT. I know you quite well, so, as the only educated member of Team Arrow among the illiterate, Thea remembered her resume well." Felicity was speechless. The girl before her had recounted her background in a few words, reciting it without even using a computer. Did this mean the Quinn organization was keeping an eye on her? As a top hacker, she was genuinely intimidated. Seeing her somewhat intimidated, Thea felt a surge of satisfaction. This was the advantage of knowing the plot. She knew countless plot points but wouldn't dare reveal them to Malcolm, and today she had a rare opportunity to show them off. How cool. "Would you like to have a drink? I'll buy you." Thea still hoped to be her friend. Felicity gestured towards the Quinn building in the distance, implying, "Shouldn't you go back right away?" Thea laughed out loud, "Haha, I'm out here to have fun too." "You're out here to have fun, but I'm out here to work," Felicity explained stubbornly. "Yeah, we're all here to work. Any drinks you have will be charged to me." In reality, Thea was being hypocritical. The bills here were originally kept by Malcolm, but she just stayed. Felicity, while still not completely convinced, figured she could get by anywhere and that her current job was dispensable, so she casually started chatting with her. Thea then told a few jokes about the group's executives, and Felicity reminisced about her college days. The two had a great time chatting, and when they got to the point of discussing the photos, they decided to go and check it out. At the bar, they happened to see the mistress or second mistress of the bar owner who had served Thea before. She asked her to serve them both drinks, and they continued chatting and exchanging feelings. Felicity, now looking innocent in her blonde dress, had once been a playful person, sporting smoky makeup and a punk look, but she'd only changed her style after her boyfriend's incarceration. She wasn't averse to places like bars. Instead, she felt a strange sense of familiarity. As Felicity continued to recount her experiences, the part she could talk about, of course, Thea learned that she graduated high school at 16, college at 18, and started her master's program at 20. She was quite the academic. "Thea, you're smart. You can finish high school in 204. College is exciting, high school is so boring." Felicity hadn't touched alcohol in a while, and now she was drinking a bit more, her words less cautious than they had been at first. This intrigued Thea. Previously, between company management and martial arts training, she'd thought high school was a waste of time and given up. But after hearing Felicity's words today, it seemed she could speed things up. American high school, grades 9 through 12, was 4 years long, and the content was incredibly simple. Compared to the sophomore level in some other country across the Pacific, she could definitely pass. If all else fails, we can still give him some money. Quinn Enterprises has sponsored many university laboratories. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 Hot Springs and Learning Skills. The two heroic women drank from morning until afternoon, seemingly a long time, but their stomachs were limited and they hadn't drunk much. After eating a little, they found a room to rest for a while. Then Thea suddenly remembered she still had to go to the grove to learn martial arts from her father. She was still a little drunk, and her concentration was not good. She was really not in a good state. She called the bar owner and asked if there was a place to bathe. "Do you think this is a resort?" Although she was annoyed, the bar owner dared not say no to this guest who was like her own mother. He took Thea to a small bathhouse in the back, saying it had never been opened before. Felicity had been planning to go home, but after hearing that the bathhouse was free, she joined in. The owner saw that they had been chatting all day and, not knowing what her relationship with Thea was, didn't dare to stop her. Thea changed into a bathrobe and entered the room, only to discover that the owner had dug a hot spring specially for her, with a small wall around it. The pool was not big, and it would be crowded for 4 people. 1 person or 2 people would be a stretch. She had expected a single shower room, but it turned out to be a small one. "Oh, little Thea, you're so cunning. We should have come in earlier to such a nice place." Felicity looked around and found that there were no outsiders. She quickly took off her clothes and jumped into the pool, enjoying it beautifully. "Wow, she has a great figure," Thea muttered softly. After soaking for a while, Felicity found that she was still in a daze, so she pulled her hand and said, "What are you looking at? Come down quickly, you can't soak in a hot spring after drinking. I heard that it's bad for your health." Thea felt that it was not good to be frank without any preparation. She vaguely remembered that there was such a saying, so she hurried to explain. "We have been drinking for 3 hours. And those are for people with diseases. It's okay for us to soak for a short time." I'm relieved to read, Thea had no choice but to take off her bathrobe hesitantly and enter the pool. "Hey, there's no one here, right? Why are you still wearing your underwear? Wow, Thea, your skin is so smooth." "Thea, you're really small," the unscrupulous female scoundrel successfully teased the future heroine, leaving Thea blushing. It was probably the humidity in the room, and Felicity was a bit nearsighted without her glasses, so she couldn't see clearly. Although a little awkward at first, Thea soon realized that a little drink, a nap, and then a hot spring bath was indeed quite relaxing. Little did she know that this idea would also mark the beginning of the Women's Superhero League's habit of having a hot spring bath for every meeting. Although she always reminded the women not to drink, Wonder Woman would always say, "We're all superheroes, what's there to be afraid of?" After a normal banter, the two of them didn't do anything too extreme. Felicity drove Thea to the forest, and they waved goodbye. Thea looked around, seeing that Malcolm hadn't arrived yet, and needing to calm herself, she found a large tree and sat cross-legged. Malcolm had been here for a while, and Thea's entire day was practically under his watch. He arrived 5 minutes earlier than Thea, having been spotted early last time, so he was much more cautious this time, observing from the perimeter to test her perception range. By comparing some details, he estimated Thea's effective perception range to be approximately 10 meters. The League of Assassins' selection criteria for a 5-meter range considered talent. He had even met Ms. Shiva, the world's top assassin, who seemed to have a 20-meter range, but that was the result of years of training. Aside from sniper rifles, Ms. Shiva could completely dodge any cold or hot weapon, making her impenetrable. Thea couldn't quite achieve that yet, but he believed that with training, she would be able to completely dodge medium-range cold weapons like bows and arrows, and even long-range pistols within her range. What an incredible talent! Seeing Thea sitting motionless under a tree, Malcolm had a certain appreciation for her patience. She was intelligent, talented, patient, resilient, and young, with such good qualities that he felt a little jealous. He emerged from behind a tree and said hoarsely, "Thea Quinn, are you ready for training?" In reality, Thea had already spotted him, but had remained silent. Malcolm's guess was wrong. Her sensing range was roughly a 12-meter radius. The original Thea 1.0 was a sidekick hero, though her strength was average, but if you compared her to the League of Assassins minions, she was definitely much stronger. Now, this 2.0 fusion-enhanced version is even more extraordinary. It may seem like just a sum of numbers, but in reality, it represents a huge leap in strength and potential. It's like running the 100 meters in 10 seconds versus 5 seconds. It may seem like a small difference, but the difference is enormous. I'm ready. Please teach me. I'm not afraid of hardship. Very good. I see your determination. You can call me Black Arrow. From now on, I will teach you various fighting techniques. What would you like to learn first? Malcolm said, his hands behind his back, with the air of a master. Thea chuckled inwardly. I wonder if you can learn the 72 transformations, but she remained serious, saying, since you're known as the Black Arrow, why don't you learn archery first? Let me see what you're capable of. This sounded a bit arrogant. I've come all this way to teach you, and you still want to test me? A more righteous hero might have just walked away, but Malcolm was a villain. He'd appreciate a bit of temper, and he'd despise your timidity. He pulled a basket of tennis balls from his backpack and handed it to Thea, telling her to throw them randomly into the sky. Oh, it seems Oliver practiced this way in the original story, too. You two really share the same heritage. The ninja master taught old Ma, who taught him. Was this the third generation of his apprenticeship? Compare that to his brother, who taught his daughter Talia, who passed it on to Yao Fei, who then taught his daughter. Oliver and Yao Fei's daughter fired a shot underwater, and in a flash of golden light, Oliver had mastered the essence of archery. Wasn't this his fifth generation of apprenticeship? Fortunately, the foreigner didn't care about the issue of seniority, otherwise my brother wouldn't be able to greet me when he saw me in the future. The ninja master lived for over 800 years and was known as the world's #1 gardener in DC. He had many students all over the world. As an unkillable supervillain, he trained countless superheroes. What a sad story. Not wanting to cipher the ninja master, Thea took out a tennis ball and tossed it high, while carefully watching Malcolm's feet and movements. With a snap, the black feather arrow with the tennis ball nailed to the tree trunk. This move is difficult, much more difficult than Oliver shooting at the wall. After all, you have to calculate the landing point of the arrow and keep it on the tree trunk, otherwise it will not look good if it flies too far away. No wonder Malcolm beat Green Arrow so badly in the first season. He is indeed better than Green Arrow. Next, Thea kept throwing tennis balls, sometimes high and sometimes low. Malcolm was indeed in peak form, as if he were divinely assisted. After a few crackling sounds, each arrow hit the center of the ball with the same precision, nailing all 9 tennis balls to the tree trunk one by one. Great, I'll learn this, Thea said with shining eyes. Huh? She secretly breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, Malcolm had performed a little bit above his level today. After all, he was in his 40s and 50s, and he hadn't been practicing martial arts since childhood. In order not to disappoint his daughter, he was more focused than ever. If Thea had thrown a few more balls, he might not have been able to hit them. This was the biggest difference between him and Green Arrow. His physical strength or endurance was not as good as that of the young Green Arrow. He could beat Green Arrow in a short period of concentration, but he couldn't do it for a long time. Green Arrow, as an ordinary person without any enhancements, had been tested by history in terms of his resistance to beatings. Chapter 16: The Usefulness of Perception. Stand upright, feet shoulder width apart. Use your left hand to control the direction of your arrow's landing, while your right hand maintains stability. Grasp the string with your index, middle, and ring fingers, placing your index finger above the nock and your middle and ring fingers below it. Malcolm constantly adjusted Thea's posture, correcting every mistake. As a master archer, his instruction was exceptional, clearly explaining the key points and reasons for each movement. Many people can do something well on their own, but struggle to teach others, but Malcolm was clearly not one of them. Thea held a red, low-weight recurved bow, without a scope or stabilizer. This is the downside of women, they're naturally weaker than men. Despite the prevalence of female archers in games and anime, it's actually quite difficult to become a master. Lack of strength means less lethality. Even with the massive population losses of ancient wars, no monarch had ever recruited women as archers. In the original storyline, Thea Quinn, known as the fastest member of Team Arrow, might have considered using a higher rate of fire to compensate for low damage. However, Her subsequent obscurity and even her departure from the team clearly proved this approach was unsuccessful. The future is a matter of time. She has already touched her own destiny and can surely change her unfortunate life trajectory. Thea gathered her composure, silently reciting Malcolm's instructions. She loaded her arrow, drew her bow, and aimed at a tree 10 meters away. Malcolm had drawn a red circle in the center of the tree. Exhaling and inhaling, regulating her breathing, she stared at the red circle before her. With a whoosh, the arrow flew out. Concentrated, Thea felt a sense of destiny, as if a part of her were following the arrow's path. This arrow was sure to hit the target. With a muffled snap, the arrow firmly lodged inside the red circle on the tree trunk, very close to the center. According to the competition score, it would be at least a 7 or 8. Malcolm was honestly a bit jealous of his first success. Back when he was training with a ninja master, it took him 3 days of tireless practice to achieve this on a 10-meter target. To prevent his daughter from becoming proud, he found a 20-meter target and gestured for it. As expected, Thea missed, but the deviation was smaller than Malcolm had expected, and the arrow grazed the tree trunk. Feeling more at ease, Old Ma began to explain the precautions carefully. In reality, Thea's first shot wasn't a result of her own archery skills, but rather the result of her superior perception. The entire 10-meter range was within her reach, and as long as she focused, she could hit the target every time. It wasn't some supernatural power. Many people in real life know they're going to make a three-pointer the moment they release the ball. It's just a mysterious feeling. But 20 meters was beyond her ability to cheat. While she maintained accuracy for the first 10 meters, she missed as expected for the last 10. She was still a long way from those cheaters. It's like Prometheus has a helmet that can download all the martial arts skills of other fighters. Just click the mouse to search for a target, confirm, and you'll instantly learn it. It's as convenient and quick as Neo's martial arts lessons in The Matrix, unlike me who had to practice so hard. Where did he find that helmet? The comics don't even mention it. I listened patiently to Lao Ma's explanation, and I had to say it was excellent. He explained the key points and habits in a simple and clear way. As expected of a Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, no, an outstanding senior day student who graduated from the Nandarbit Martial Arts School. Thea absorbed this knowledge like a sponge. The fusion of their two souls brought not only an expanded sense of perception, but also deeper thinking, swifter memory, and sharper reflexes. It was an all-round improvement. If Thea had always been a quasi-hero, she now had the qualities of a top-tier hero. By the end of the class, Thea could shoot at a target 20 meters away. While not perfect, hitting 9 out of 10 arrows still made Lao Ma feel sad. And that was the first night of class. He'd spent a week training to get to this point, his back aching and his legs cramping. It was so great to be young. He silently excused himself for not being as talented as his daughter, escorting Thea to Quinn's mansion before returning home. He changed into casual clothes and asked the housekeeper, "Is Tommy back?" "No, he just had a phone message to deal with," the housekeeper replied honestly. HMPH, Malcolm snorted. What could he be up to? He must have gone off to hang out with Laurel since he wasn't home today. A sudden feeling of helplessness washed over him. He didn't know how to raise this son left by his late wife. His intelligence, his determination, his resilience, none of it was like his own. If he hadn't trusted his late wife to stay unfaithful, he would have doubted he was his son, especially when compared to his daughter. Everyone has talent, it's just a matter of discovering it. Just like in the otherworldly country of Foot Basin, during World War II, Ishiwara Kanji constantly praised his country's prime minister, saying, "Tojo-kun would be fantastic as a warehouse keeper. He could manage at least 5 machine guns." The implication was, "You're kidding me, let him become prime minister." Back to Tommy's question, he wasn't without talent, he just wasn't using it in the right place. Returning to the city in the future, Oliver recognized his potential and encouraged his friend to open a bar. Sure enough, Tommy's business flourished. If Malcolm hadn't used his ultimate move, the chain might have gone public. Malcolm's thoughts grew increasingly sad. Looking at his wife's photo and recalling their past, he resolved to wait another 6 months. If nothing improved, he'd let him do whatever he wanted. He'd ensure he lived a happy and comfortable life, which would be his way of fulfilling his deceased wife's promise. When Thea returned home, she found Moira waiting in the living room. She gave her mother a big hug. "Mom, I'm home." Moira had learned that Malcolm had hired someone to train her daughter, unaware that this person was actually him. She was worried her pampered daughter wouldn't be able to endure the hardship, and she was also afraid the person would seriously injure her. She waited in the living room, feeling depressed. Deep down, she didn't think it was necessary. With plenty of money at home, they could hire any bodyguard they wanted. Why did she have to go through the hard training herself? Seeing her daughter's cheerful return, she felt it necessary to reassure her. If you're tired, don't go tomorrow. Mom's worried about you. Facing her mother's worried eyes, Thea remained resolute. I'm not afraid of the hardship, Mom. I'm just afraid I can't protect you and this family, my poor child. I told you I'd respect any decision you make. If ever you don't want to learn anymore, just tell me, okay? Moira said seriously. Okay, I got it. Thea smiled and nodded, and the mother and daughter embraced as they walked into the bedroom. Chapter 17 Weapons Research and Development Department. Lying in bed, Thea knew her mother wasn't entirely pleased with her decision, but she simply went along with her feelings and said nothing. But she had no idea how dangerous the world truly was, or how many times she'd been awakened from her dreams. According to various sources, Superman and Batman have clashed several times, with the official statement being mutually victorious. What does this mean? It suggests Superman has reached the Iron Age or postmodern age. Otherwise, no matter how powerful Batman is, such a victorious outcome wouldn't be possible. Just look at Superman in his Silver Age and you'll understand. He could blow out stars with a single breath, destroy the solar system with a single sneeze, pull a dozen planets with his own power, exceed the speed of light, surpass the Flash, break time barriers, and kill his own mother without regard for cause and effect. Does this description sound familiar? These are the powers the protagonist possesses in the final 2 chapters of a fantasy novel. Superman appears at this level from the moment he appears. Are you afraid? Even a Super Saiyan wouldn't be his match. How could Batman possibly defeat him under these conditions? So, Superman is definitely at his weakest right now. In reality, Thea wasn't afraid of Superman being too strong, she was afraid of him being too weak. If a Silver Age Superman protected Earth, there would be absolute peace. No villains would dare to seek death. She could be a beautiful CEO, playing games with Felicity. What a wonderful life. Unfortunately, these were chaotic times. Wealth, if not transformed into power, was like a castle in the air, crumbling at the slightest touch. She should have paid more attention to the group's Weapons Research and Development Department. They must have the equipment she desperately needed. Perhaps she could even become the DC Iron Man. Alice, her expectations were a bit wishful thinking. To maintain secrecy, she could only develop the technology herself, or with a few assistants. Even if she managed to pull in the Quinn Merlyn group for a 5-year research plan, even if she succeeded, the military would still snatch it up. Marvel's Tony Stark still surrendered a suit despite the protection of SHIELD, so what about her? She could only develop it on her own. But Tony, having entered MIT at 15 and graduated with a double PhD by 18, could knock out a Mark-ickless warrior in a cave. I'm 15, too, and haven't even finished high school yet. Oh, people are so different. Even though her dream of becoming Iron Man remains a pipe dream, Thea still has to navigate a routine of going to work, going to the woods, and then back home. As for graduating high school, Moira has thrown a lot of Franklin aside to pursue technical research and lobbying. She's excelling so far, and if nothing goes wrong, she'll be able to attend Princeton's Department of Electrical Engineering next year. Moira is very supportive of her daughter's decision to attend a prestigious university, at least more so than learning how to be more efficient at killing. As for why she chose engineering over more female-dominated fields like journalism and biopharmaceuticals, she didn't dwell on it. Women studying mechanical engineering in the US aren't many, but they are. It's not surprising. Malcolm doesn't mind, but he's also helped smooth things over. After all, learning more is always good. He's also wondering if his son's idiocy is due to his lack of education. Should he join the team? But after comparing his set scores, he abandoned the idea. Tommy, with his elementary school level, should stay in Star City and not embarrass himself out there. At this point, Thea was unaware she'd inadvertently caused Tommy another bit of trouble. She was on a tour of the company's Weapons Research and Development Department, to put it nicely, an inspection, to put it bluntly, just hanging out. Dr. Hoffman, what is this? Thea asked, pointing to an object resembling Magneto's helmet. The white-haired elder beside her wasn't exactly pleased that this young lady had wandered into his place for no reason. However, After the mysterious disappearance of their supervisor, Andre, he was left to coordinate the entire department, and he hesitated to offend the future successor to the company. He mumbled, "This is a positioning helmet, you could think of it as something like radar." It wasn't actually radar at all, but she was afraid the young woman would ask more questions, so she made up a familiar term, hoping to get the point across quickly. Radar. Thea was a bit confused. The object looked round and pleasant to the touch, but it couldn't possibly be radar. Another example of someone taking advantage of her lack of education. Ignoring the radar references, Dr. Hoffman focused on the question in question. "You said it's a positioning helmet? How does it locate?" Dr. Hoffman felt a little frustrated. He was too honest. He'd given the actual name. Anyone with a clue would have noticed. He could only honestly say, "It uses a probability distribution algorithm," he thought. "You little girl, let me show you my power." Thea hadn't heard of such a high-sounding term, but she politely asked, "What does it calculate?" The old man, no longer bothered to answer, whispered, "It calculates the surrounding bioelectric field." Thea admitted she'd read a few books and understood the term. "Is it like sharks? Is this passive electric field positioning?" "Oh, what a capable girl. Aren't kids her age supposed to be out drinking at bars?" The old doctor hadn't expected the group's daughter to reveal the key to his and his team's research. His interest piqued, he began to elaborate on his masterpiece. "Miss Quinn, you're right. We developed this invention by analyzing sharks' feeding patterns. They're enormous, and their eyesight has deteriorated significantly. Over their long evolutionary history, they've developed a special type of bioelectricity that allows them to analyze the food around them. If their target escapes, they can track it down within 10 kilometers. We reverse-engineered this invention based on this characteristic." Listening to the old man's explanation, Thea interpreted it in gaming terms. It was a bit like a hunter's marking technique. As long as the target survived, they'd remain visible on the map. Quite advanced. Could he possibly use this invention? Seeing Thea's enthusiastic interest in his story, the old doctor was delighted. This young woman was the one who showed the most respect for him and his team among the group's senior executives. After all, his team had been researching for years and had produced many results, but claiming it was profitable for the group was a joke. He personally didn't see how this research could boost national production. He felt a sense of guilt towards the group. Constantly asking for money but failing to produce results. This is underwater lighting equipment. The equipment on the market can only reach 100 meters, while ours can maintain a lighting range of 500 meters. This is a micro-missile, available in ground-to-air and anti-air modes. Although its size has been reduced, its range has also been shortened and we are currently improving it. This is emergency equipment. It can be remotely controlled at a speed of 400 kilometers per hour and can transport about a ton of supplies. She was truly eye-opening as the old doctor introduced things along the way. However, many things did not have much commercial value. After looking at them for a long time, she only found that underwater searchlights could be sold for a few dollars, but the purchasing population was too small, so she could only make some money for travel expenses, and it would be difficult to make a profit. Chapter 18 Confession? After a whole day, Thea had a general understanding of the weapons research department. It was too disorganized, researching whatever came to mind. While she wanted to contribute, she couldn't take all the equipment away. This was the downside of the modern corporate system. Every aspect was so rigidly regulated. Even if she became president, she couldn't handle it. After all, it was company property, not her own. Batman's equipment was also obtained through collusion between him and the company president, and he even stole his own equipment. It seemed hilarious in the movie, but it was frustrating when it happened to her. She couldn't just tell the warehouse manager, "I'll take 2 missiles to make the work more humane. Your submachine guns are pretty nice, give me 5,000 rounds of ammunition from my office." Besides, she had no place to process the equipment if she moved it out. Perhaps she could use the Quinn steel manufacturing and welding facility, where Oliver would be based in the future? That wouldn't work either. Moira was watching her too closely, and she simply didn't have the time. For the next few days, Thea frequently visited the R&D department. Even if she couldn't get her hands on something, she could still see it. Dr. Hoffman didn't object to the young heir of the group's preference for explosives and rockets over jewelry parties. The two chatted from time to time, and the days passed slowly. Moira was naturally aware of her whereabouts, but she wondered if her daughter hadn't fully recovered from the trauma. Otherwise, who would have liked airplanes and artillery? Malcolm didn't think it was a big deal. He himself was already somewhere between insane and semi-insane. He simply confirmed some of the weapons his daughter was interested in. His advisors had analyzed them, revealing that she was interested in high-tech weapons of mass destruction. What was she planning? Was she planning to destroy the world? He was just planning to destroy the slums, but his daughter, who had inherited his bloodline, was even more radical than him. Finally, Thea and Dr. Hoffman spent the entire morning discussing medium-range missiles. Moira was completely restless and decided to find her daughter something to do, to give her more work. Thea, take a look at this document. The group is expanding its software department? Great, let's get started. Thea was puzzled. Why did you ask me for this? I'm going to put you in charge of the establishment and subsequent operation of the software department, Moira thought to herself. Quinn Enterprises is a steel giant, and its financial and personnel are mostly in the real estate industry. The software department is just a shell, nothing at all. You can just go and figure it out. Besides, software is useless, even if you try to figure it out for a long time. At least that's what she thought, having never seen artificial intelligence. Thea didn't have as many thoughts as her. She just knew that she finally had some power, no longer just a backpacker. Being an assistant sounded good, but the work was too tedious and passive, and it didn't suit her personality at all. Now she could finally be independent and make the decisions. Congratulations. Where will I work? The group's rooms were all occupied, and Thea hadn't seen any sign for the software department in all the days she had been there. You can find an office space in the group's property. Everything is up to you. Show Mom what you can do, Moira said encouragingly. Really? Thea felt like she'd gotten too much good news today. Independent? Any location of her choice? Sure thing. We've already secured Green Arrow's future base, so we'll let him find another one later. But right now, she couldn't just ask for a certain location, she needed to pretend to go and see for herself. She said, I understand. I'll work hard and make a difference. After receiving the order to assign 10 employees to build the software department and hire the rest on her own, Thea happily left the CEO's office, humming a song. Seeing her daughter show no sign of dissatisfaction, Moira felt relieved. Why say again? Because her daughter was so eccentric, so dedicated to her work, so diligent in her studies, so driven and ambitious that it was frightening. Look at Tommy, so good. He's just idling away at Merlyn, flirting with the receptionist whenever he can, and never once mentioned anything so scary as practicing martial arts or researching missiles. She picked up the phone and instructed her secretary to book a family trip to Europe for Dr. Hoffman from the Weapons Development Department. He was supposed to take his family on a trip, all expenses covered by the company. Just one request, don't come back for 3 months. Dr. Hoffman, whose wife had passed away years earlier, heard the news about the group and, convinced he'd go, embarked on a European tour with his 2 sons, a daughter, and a dog. They eventually met their soulmate in the Aegean Sea, and were filled with gratitude towards the group. But that's a story for another time. Unaware that her new friend had found a lover thanks to her actions, Thea returned to her desk in a daze, rereading the document twice. It was truly a blessing from heaven. If it were any other department, she'd be stumped, but software? Haha, I know Felicity, with her world-class hacker prowess, she could handle any software. They'd become close friends after their last drink together. It might sound strange, but 2 women can bond over a drink. Sure enough, a drinking table is a breeding ground for friendships, whether male or female. I haven't even visited her at the office yet, so I'm sure she'd help me. Thea was also a little hesitant. Would she agree to give up her dawdling position and her constant running around? Thea felt a bit strangely sullen, feeling overwhelmed. Actually, it didn't matter if she refused. We could enforce it, haha. Felicity's workplace was truly remote, the company's archive management and information technology department. After searching for nameplates, she finally found the department tucked away in a corner on the 2nd floor. It was as if it had become invisible. Thea bet she hadn't noticed it in all the days she'd been here. Felicity Smoke, the IT woman who had become the future's watcher, was now slumped over her desk, her glasses off, sound asleep. She must have used a lot of lipstick, as Thea saw her drool had stained a large patch of her sleeve red. He knocked on the table. Hey, wake up. Don't sleep anymore. Miss Smoke blearily opened her eyes, staring at the person before her for a long moment, then put on her glasses and studied her closely. Thea? Off work? Looking for a drink? Oh my god, is this girl an alcoholic? She doesn't have that hobby in the plot. Isn't she a homebody? In the excitement, she didn't think about it and blurted out, Felicity, will you come with me? Felicity's face was filled with the word dumb. She was dumbfounded and murmured, Are you confessing to me? I need to think about it. She almost went crazy. How could you understand my English so well? What kind of brain circuit is this? Thinking about it carefully, she couldn't blame her completely. It seemed that the way she asked was also a bit problematic. Chapter 19, Recruiting People. Thea quickly clarified, that's not what you meant. It's this, she explained. Felicity squinted at her, not sure if she'd heard her clearly, and slowly said, You have designs on me. Oh, how did this girl suddenly become so perceptive? She'd always been so confused. Thea's expression of surprise caught Felicity's eye. I guessed it right, little Thea, you are not honest. She picked up the computer and started typing. Hey, our state law actually allows this kind of marriage. Did you plan it in advance? Thea stared blankly at Felicity, who was constantly searching for all kinds of strange information. From time to time, she heard her mumbling to herself, but you are still a little young, you have to be 16 years old. Maybe I can help you change your identity information? This firewall is very bad, I never thought about this kind of thing. It seems more exciting than men. Do I have a tendency in this aspect? Oh, this kind of marriage cannot go to church, but I am Jewish, which can be ignored. She stared at Felicity, talking to herself with a dull look. Her face turned red as she spoke. How did this misunderstanding come about? She just wanted to ask her to help. How could she understand it like this? And what the hell is a church? Why would I go there? Despite repeated explanations, Felicity still didn't believe it. She stubbornly thought that the explanation was a cover-up and said that she could consider developing a relationship between the two. Honestly, Felicity might seem a little unreliable, but she's actually quite charming. Her stuttering is due to her mind racing, her words failing to keep up. In the original storyline, she captivated both Green Arrow and the Atom, and her own strength was astonishing. He was also quite impressed by her, but he simply wanted her to help him. It felt like he was desperately seeking talent, not that kind of need, right? Thea was still standing at her desk. Through her collar, she could see a little bit of her neck below her neck. It looked soft, and as she touched it, she suddenly realized what she'd been thinking. This unscrupulous woman had led her astray. He quickly interrupted her antics. She'd already been looking for vacation options that wouldn't violate local laws. Stop, please. I just wanted to ask for your help. We can talk about those things later, okay? Thea had the thought of sacrificing her looks to get the IT girl to her side. Whether it was the Iron Man suit or any other technological weapon, they all relied on computer software. Since it was a misunderstanding, then so be it. She had nothing to lose anyway. As for the future of Team Arrow without computer support, that was none of her business. If she truly felt guilty, Thea remembered that there was a bee-controlling metahuman in Central City with impressive computer skills, second only to Felicity. She could recommend him to Oliver. Besides, Felicity's father and ex-boyfriend were also experts among experts. With the exception of this attractive girl, all three of the Felicity family members could be given to Green Arrow. She was quite generous. As for the aforementioned villains, they were not within Thea's consideration. Felicity crossed her shoulders and stared at her. So you're trying to tell me, huh? What's it? Thea nearly fainted. She'd explained it twice, but the girl hadn't heard a word, lost in her own fantasies, or rather, imaginations, barely listening to what she was saying. She could only repeat the story of establishing the software department, then, fearing she wouldn't believe it, showed her Moira's order. Felicity gaped and pointed at herself. Me? What can I do? At this point, she had just left her old hacking life behind. While she still occasionally hacked, it was mostly a habit. She hadn't figured out her future and was still at a stage where she didn't know what to do. Thea had originally planned to go it alone, but then realized the sheer number of problems was too much to handle on her own. The first person she thought of for help was Felicity. Her character was impeccable. It might be a little early, but the timing was still right. She could finally get her plan out there. The trust and friendship were mutual. Connecting her phone to Felicity's computer, Thea continued to describe her plan. Through her recent conversations with Dr. Hoffman, she'd figured out the purpose of most of the weapons department's equipment. She found a few highly technical but non-threatening props, and after some creative combinations, she came up with a thing on Felicity's computer. It was the original Marvel Green Goblin skateboard, but Thea planned to dye it red and rename it the Red Arrow skateboard. Thea Quinn originally had the nicknames Red Arrow and Quick Hand, but Quick Hand sounded like a thief, which wasn't very appealing. She decided to stick with Red Arrow, at least it was her current plan, as she struggled with the naming. Using a piece of emergency equipment she'd seen before as the basis, she modified it. It could travel at 400 kilometers per hour, hold a load of 1 ton, and could levitate and fly, perfectly meeting her needs. Instead of a remote control system, it was controlled by brainwaves. This required another piece of equipment, the previously mentioned shark positioning helmet. While it retained its positioning capabilities, it could also reverse remember Thea's bioelectric field, enabling brainwave control. This required Felicity to write extensive programming to control the commands. The final piece needed was the anti-gravity suit that would force Mr. Andre to serve as a Jinchuuriki. Thea had calculated that it could withstand the internal forces of a 400 mph speed. Combining the aforementioned pieces would create a simplified Red Arrow skateboard. As for the weapons system, it was a joke. While any of these items could be pulled out with excuses, the missiles and their uses were too limited. Thea couldn't think of any other uses besides murder and arson. She simply had no excuse. She was only 15 and didn't even have a gun license. Would she tell Moira to compare 2 missiles with T-eggs? Even this simple equipment took Thea a tremendous amount of effort. As for Tony Stark's ability to knock the Markai out of a cave with a pile of scrap metal, Thea could only attribute it to a stroke of luck. It defied objective laws. Even genius has its limits, right? Felicity carefully read the blueprint and looked at Thea with her big eyes. Cool. This invention is perfect. You're so smart. Let's get started now. This girl could become friends with that funny guy Cisco Ramon in the future. She is also passionate about technological weapons. As the saying goes, she loves beauty but loves weapons even more. Although the plan is quite detailed, it cannot be done right away. What needs to be hidden still needs to be hidden. Just because Felicity can be trusted doesn't mean others can be trusted. The two first drove to Quinn Enterprises Steel and Welding Company. It has been abandoned. Thea plans to make this her own territory in the future. There are still many ground facilities here, and various processing equipment and welding machines are piled up on the ground. Chapter 20 Establishing a Secret Base. The factory had a large basement. It was unclear why such a facility was built in the first place, but now it was a good deal for Thea. She selected a few lightweight, still usable pieces of processing equipment and welding machines. The two women painstakingly lifted the heavy items onto a cart and lugged them down into the basement. Luckily, both women were European and American, both quite strong, at least a bit stronger than their Asian counterparts. Felicity looked like a homebody, but she was actually quite muscular, and with her clenched teeth and glaring eyes, she was a tough woman. Thea had been training with Old Ma for about 6 months, and her strength had increased somewhat. Of course, Felicity was still the primary laborer, given her age. After installing and debugging the equipment, Thea had been reading about machining. She wasn't aiming for Tony's 8th-level machinist or 9th-level welder prowess, but for the future Iron Man suit and the current Red Arrow skateboard, she didn't need to master the basics. They sealed the door to the basement and camouflaged it. From then on, the outer area would be the software department's offices, and the inner chamber would be their secret base. The two women leaned against the wall, panting heavily. Thea was somewhat impressed by Oliver. They were both so exhausted, considering he'd be doing all this work alone in the future. His thick arms were definitely strong. Felicity said listlessly, "I'm so tired, Thea. Let's go to the hot springs." "No way. We're going." Thinking back to their last experience, Thea felt a little scared, yet also a little excited. Why was she excited? She flatly rejected this corrupt and depraved behavior, declaring she'd return to report to Moira. She told her not to be idle either. While it was just a cover-up and they weren't planning on making a big splash, the basic framework needed to be established. Finding a software engineer was Felicity's responsibility. After all, she was a top hacker, so she believed the people she chose were highly skilled. For the next few days, Thea was busy, pulling out the equipment she needed under various pretexts. At the same time, Moira reported that the software department needed powerful computers, so a large amount of funds was approved. It was another process of black accounting, and a set of powerful servers was installed for Felicity in the secret base. This made the former hacker and now the homebody very excited. It is true that things are precious only when you have them and then lose them. Looking at Felicity's bright smile, she would not object to asking her to do something embarrassing now, right? Those who have wrong ideas can kneel down. Thea took out a bucket of paint, 2 brushes, and a spray can, and told Felicity to paint 1 wall each and make this secret room clean. Thea felt that she had a bit of obsessive-compulsive disorder. Maybe the future Oliver did not care about the environment and stayed in such a dirty environment for more than a year, but she could not bear to see it. The existence of the secret room could not be exposed, so only the 2 of them could do the painting work. Felicity, who was happily playing on the computer, had never expected this scene. She, a master's degree holder from MIT, would have to take up such a promising job as decorating. Thea had been to her apartment and she was very lazy. She would only empty the trash can when it was full. If no one pushed her from time to time, she would have lived a life of idleness. Felicity, who was heartbroken, did not refuse the offer of painting the walls. In her eyes, this was a completely optional task. According to her usual personality, she would not have done it. But seeing that Thea, a rich girl, had rolled up her sleeves to paint, she did not seem to be a delicate person. She could only change her clothes with reluctance and accompany the girl to paint equipment, no, to paint the walls. Felicity brushed the floor, muttering, moving machinery, installing doors, painting walls. Where's that advanced weapon upgrade? Liar, Thea lowered her head, pretending not to hear. She truly couldn't stand the mess. She'd been worried she couldn't handle it all alone, so she'd enlisted her help. Men and women have different expectations for their work environments. That's why it's so hard for female heroes. Setting up a base is incredibly difficult. Look at Batman, he'd just make do in a cave, and I'd never seen him resort to something as lowly as painting walls. After all that hard work, the environment had improved significantly, at least to a decent level. Thea had been using Felicity as a loader, mover, and decorator for 2 days. It was hard to refuse Felicity's suggestion of a hot spring bath, so she bravely accompanied her. The details of the experience, which took place below the neck, are difficult to describe. To paraphrase the martial arts master Suzu, the whole experience was excellent, wonderful, indescribably blissful. Another month passed quickly, and the preliminary work for the software department was nearly complete. Although Thea wished it would just drag on, she had no interest in either software or hardware. She had just started building her skateboard, and Felicity was writing a new algorithm for brainwave acquisition. Moira flatly rejected her suggestion of another month of preparation and told her to begin work immediately. The boss was determined to get started immediately, forcing the 2 women to temporarily put their work aside. Thea, taking the helm, assigned Felicity the position of deputy helmsman. It sounded impressive, but in reality, they only recruited 3 people from the group. The others were either incompetent or leered at the 2, their minds etched in a lecherous way. 2 of the 3 subordinates were women, of average looks, each thinner than the other. If they were tied together, they could be blown away by a 4-6 gale. The other man spoke softly, revealing a congenital testosterone deficiency and spinal cord edema. If all the bad guys were like that, Thea could fight 10 of them at once. Thea briefly expounded on the group's importance to the new department, but the surroundings, the bear factory, the grease stains in the corners, the windows rattling in the wind, made her words seem hollow. Looking at her 3 frail minions, while not quite the same as Malcolm's city-wide entourage, it was still a start, and Thea ambitiously declared the start. Soon, Thea's first day as department manager consisted of tea and newspapers, because there was simply nothing to do. The Quinn Group, founded on steelmaking, boasted connections in both the black and white worlds, a team of muscular men who could handle any role. It's fair to say the Quinn Group's origins were anything but glamorous. For a company like this operating on the fringes of the market, the demand for software was practically non-existent. Was she going to sleep during the day and work at night? While that was manageable, it was a waste of time, and her time was precious. More than half of the original 5 years had already passed. He groggily got up and went to find Felicity. The situation was completely different from when they were at the group. Back then, Felicity slept and Thea was swamped. Now, Thea couldn't do anything. She couldn't just set up a target in front of her 3 subordinates for archery practice, they'd have to run away. Felicity had no such problem. There was nothing shameful about writing her brainwave acquisition software. She could do it any time. In reality, no one knew what she was doing, they just looked impressive. Chapter 21 Facial Recognition Software. When Thea staggered to Felicity, she was twirling 3 keyboards simultaneously, tapping away like crazy in her swivel chair. She leaned against the doorframe, her shoulders folded, and watched for a moment, realizing she was truly focused. It was embarrassing to see Thea so consumed by her own work, forgetting to eat or sleep. "Hey, let's go get some coffee," Felicity said without turning back. "No, I'm busy. Go have fun." Even if she was heartless, she couldn't leave her to work and go have fun. She grabbed a chair and sat beside her, her arm around her shoulders. "Take a break. I need you." Felicity paused her work, looking at her with a worried look on her face. "Are you going to do some manual labor again?" She was truly a capitalist nerd. She was already traumatized by the days of toil back then, even Zhuge Liang, before leaving the mountains and aspiring to be a nerd, farmed. He never complained at all. "You're far from that." Despite her internal complaints about the quality of MIT's education, Thea said, "That's outside the company." She gestured to the former factory building, now the software department's offices, spacious enough for a horse to run through. "Should we find something to do?" As the heir apparent, "I can't be completely incompetent," Thea said pitifully. "So what can we do?" Felicity's implication was that your family is just a company reborn from a former gang. "Is there anything you need software to control? Aren't you constantly strengthening your hardware to maintain your leading edge? Would buying more sticks and brass knuckles help improve performance?" Thea whispered, "Aren't you a very capable person? Do you have any basic software you can sell me? I can get these people out there busy and give my report back." Felicity tapped her right hand against her left, her small nose raised. "You have good taste. Just wait." She then found a document on her computer and clicked the mouse a few times. The printer next to her started to work. Before long, 3 sheets of printed paper were handed to Thea. "Here are some catalogs of my research from college. Take a look and see if you can use any of them. I don't think they're very practical." Her tone was excited at first, but then it became quieter. Thea looked at the sheets of paper carefully and realized a cruel reality. She knew every letter on the paper, but she had no idea what they meant when put together. "What the hell is this? You're so great just because you have a master's degree. Computerized secondary ion mass spectrometry calculation formula, tracking trends and the color flavor chain framework protocol, string algorithms and wavelength identification methods." No wonder Oliver broke up with her later in life. Living with an elementary school dropout and a master's degree holder like her, they truly had little in common, aside from their favorite sports. The lack of spiritual connection convinced Thea that this must have been the reason for their eventual breakup. This harsh reality teaches us that we must read more, otherwise, even the protagonist's halo won't hold a girl. Recalling a detail in the plot that suggested a piece of software that might be useful, Thea began searching carefully. Clapping her hands, she found it, the facial recognition cross-section algorithm. Her clapping startled Felicity, who turned and looked at Thea like a psychopath. "Are you okay?" No, this," Thea pointed at the algorithm. "How far have you gotten with this? This is for hackers. Don't mess with it, Thea. It could cause trouble if it's released," Felicity said worriedly. "Here's my plan. I'm not planning on commercial use. I'm planning on developing something and either selling it or giving it to the police to use in combating criminals. How far have you gotten with your research? Can you accurately identify suspects?" Facial recognition software's Felicity Smoke's masterpiece on the show, having been used to great effect in both Arrow and The Flash. It actually works even better when combined with cell phone tracking, but Thea isn't ready to release it entirely. Cell phone tracking involves a lot of personal privacy concerns, and she'd rather not touch that minefield now. While commercial use of this software is certainly risky, it could be used by the police or military to boost their reputation, given the poor reputation of the Quinn Group. Thea has even greater ambitions. If she could take over the Quinn Group, her mother, with nothing else to do, could run for senator or to mayor. Her family's political roots are shallow. Moira is very similar in every way to Thea's past life, the former First Lady and later Secretary of State. Her interpersonal skills are impeccable, and she possesses both political charisma and a 90% degree of charm. Keeping her in the group would be a waste of her talent. It's a little early to say this now, but a good reputation is built bit by bit, and perhaps it will be put to good use someday. Felicity also thought Thea's suggestion was feasible. She was a kind-hearted woman at heart, yet she also had a strong disdain for crime. Her attraction to Green Arrow stemmed from his heroic actions, inspiring her to follow Oliver for 5 years. She was overjoyed to hear that the software she'd developed as a hacker could be used to combat crime. The two discussed the matter and ultimately decided that Felicity would provide the initial version of the facial recognition algorithm, and Thea would purchase it on behalf of the group, assigning it to the software department for development, with a stipulation that it not be used for commercial purposes. The specific price would still be determined by the group. Felicity initially resisted the idea, but Thea's brutal revelation of her decadent habits, changing her clothes 3 times a day and her earrings daily, made her realize how important money was to her. Most importantly, it could go towards building a secret base. "Isn't this money for me?" Felicity's mouth dropped open. She'd always assumed Thea's earnest pleading was just to give her more money. She said no, but she was actually wondering where she'd spend it. "Ahem, it's for you, at least most of it." Thea felt a little embarrassed. Moira might turn a blind eye to others, but she was too strict with her daughter. The money she handled was so small, there was no chance of any shady dealings. The Red Arrow skateboard looked simple, but there were so many ways to spend money. Now was a golden opportunity, and as the saying goes, if you don't take what God gives you, you'll suffer the consequences. She had to take more, and take more. After convincing Felicity, Thea rushed straight to the CEO's office. Moira was there, extolling the advanced nature of facial recognition and vaguely pointing out the importance of giving it to the police for improving their company's image. Moira was incredibly perceptive and immediately understood Thea's intention. This was a no-brainer. No one would refuse something that would improve their image. With a stroke of her pen, she approved $1 million in funding. As for how much money her daughter gave Felicity privately, she didn't ask. She also knew that her daughter had made a good friend recently. In her opinion, this was a good sign for Thea to return to normal, and her and Walter's affairs could be gradually put on the agenda. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22 Star City Police Station. Felicity was given full responsibility for the facial recognition software, instructed to lead her team, essentially, the 3 subordinates, to develop a preliminary version and hand it over to the police. Why the preliminary version? Felicity wondered. Why not the best version? Wasn't it about fighting crime? Would giving them the best version mean they couldn't continue cooperating with the police? A one-time deal wasn't Thea's goal. She needed to maintain a long-term, friendly relationship with the police. With continued cooperation between the police and the Quinn organization, their reputation would naturally improve. Of course, she couldn't say this to the righteous Felicity. She offered another reason. If we give them the best version, they'll definitely suspect we've used this software for illegal activities before. Don't you think you haven't? It was obvious. She had definitely done it. Felicity had hacked into more servers than Malcolm had killed. She'd even controlled a satellite to see what people around her were doing, prying into people's private lives, checking on the senator's new mistress, and so on, enough to warrant a decade of punishment. Actually, she wasn't afraid of 10 years. Being a homebody is a state of mind. Whether you're at home or in prison, it doesn't really affect her. There's someone in prison to cook and clean for her. The problem is that American law is so unethical. There are specific regulations on how long hackers can't use computers during their sentences. This rule would drive Felicity crazy. If she doesn't use a computer for 3 days, she'll definitely start thinking about escaping. Thank you, Thea, you still care about me, Felicity said, a little depressed. Come on, hug me, don't cry, baby. Thea grew fond of this girl, 5 years her senior. Although a little silly, she was innocent, kind, and had a strong sense of justice. These were qualities she envied but also qualities she lacked. Pushing away her hug, Felicity rolled her eyes. I'm not a child. I'm strong. The two played around affectionately for a while, and Thea told her to recruit more if they weren't enough, but the sooner the better. Just because the software was completely handed over to Felicity didn't mean Thea was free. The $1 million Moira paid wasn't just for the software, it also covered all the subsequent work. And just because the Quinn group gave the police something, it didn't mean they had to accept it. There was still some work involved. Fortunately, Thea had connections at the police station. Detective Lance's feud with the Quinn family could fill another book, but at least they knew each other. A memory was better than no memory. Going directly to Detective Lance would likely get him brushed off. While she had no direct grudge against him, she certainly didn't have a close relationship with him. It seemed the only option was to ask Laurel to act as a go-between. She called Tommy and asked him to arrange an appointment with Laurel, and the three of them went to Big Bailey's for a meeting. Tommy was bored, counting ants. Looking at any company report for even 10 minutes would surely lead to fainting spells and other symptoms. His usually bright eyes were now filled with fatigue. He didn't ask what the call was, just put on his coat and ran out of the office. The three of them arrived at the burger shop almost immediately, ordered a few drinks, and Thea began to describe her purpose to Laurel. For Laurel, who aspired to a career in law enforcement, the difficulty of collecting evidence had always been a major headache. Seeing countless arrested criminals released due to insufficient evidence was infuriating. If this facial recognition software were available to the police and prosecutors, it would undoubtedly greatly improve the efficiency of solving cases. She didn't understand why they came to her to discuss such a promising idea. Were there any obstacles? Thea, this is a good idea. How can I help you? Well, we're planning to give the police the rights for free, but we're worried your father wouldn't approve. After all, you know his relationship with our families, Thea said, gesturing to herself and then to Tommy. Laurel thought about her father's recent grief over the death of their youngest daughter. He worked like a normal person during the day and drank all night long. It was hard to say how her once upright father would react. I think he'd agree. He's the most honest man I've ever met. Thea, you come with me. As for you, Laurel said, looking at Tommy, who was listening to the story, with a mischievous expression, you should just go have some fun somewhere else. Poor Tommy looked like an abandoned puppy. The two ignored his antics and drove to the Star City Police Department. This was Thea's first time at the station, and honestly, she was a little disappointed. It was shabby, outdated, and dimly lit. It didn't have the imposing presence she'd imagined. Thea could only see a couple of hundred officers. Actually, for a police department with a population of 1 million, there should be over 1,500 on the payroll. It's just that the city is so vast that if they were all spread out, there wouldn't be a single ripple. Headquarters only has a handful of civilian staff, giving Thea the illusion of a small staff of just a few. Television shows and movies are all fake. They make it seem like the same few police officers keep coming and going. If that were the case, with a high mortality rate among American police officers, they'd probably be disbanded after just 3 episodes. Following Laurel, they found her father, Detective Lance, a crucial figure throughout the Arrow series, akin to Commissioner Gordon in Batman, a tragic, unsung hero. His 2 daughters had died and resurrected, and after repeated suffering, his hair, now thick as weeds, had completely bald by Arrow's 5th season. Laurel detailed Thea's plan, and the two of them stared intently at Lance, eager for his approval. Ms. Quinn, what compels you to do this? Taking nothing for granted is uncharacteristic of the Quinn group, Lance said, his arms folded as he sneered at Thea. Detective, no one has instructed me to do anything. I was born and raised here. This is my home. Star City is gradually heading towards destruction. Do you see it? Shia took a breath and continued, maybe in your eyes the Quinn group is deeply sinful, but I see that it is the Quinn group that has brought vitality to the city. Originally, 50,000 workers were employed by the group. Now the group has reduced production and many of its factories have stopped working, but in this situation we still maintain employment of 30,000 people. Detective, we also hope that Star City will get better and better, and we are doing so. Seeing the sneer on his face, Shia knew that her words had some effect. Fighting crime is not only the responsibility of the Star City Police, but also the mission of all of us in Star City. I hope you can give me this opportunity to prove our value. This is not for me personally, nor for the Quinn group, but for all the kind people living in Star City. Dad, agree to it. This is not a bad thing, Laurel also persuaded. Detective Lance looked closely into Thea's eyes for a long moment. Okay, you've convinced me. I'll talk to the inspector about this. I hope I'm right. Seeing him about to leave, Thea took 2 quick steps, grabbed his arm, and said sincerely, Detective, I know you're sad about Sarah's passing, but the shipwreck also took away my brother and my father. For the sake of the deceased, please forgive my brother. Chapter 23 First Battle? Detective Lance suddenly tightened his grip on the doorframe, so hard that Thea feared he might pull the door down entirely. "Listen, little girl, I may forgive the Quinn group, but I will not forgive Oliver Queen. Not now, not ever. Mark my words." He glared at Thea and stormed off. Alice, negotiations failed. This feud is truly difficult to resolve. Oliver is such a traitor. How could he have it both ways? Even someone as fierce as Sunset, faced with two beauties, would choose Yu over her. You've embarrassed yourself, your own sister. While it didn't achieve all the desired results, at least Lance didn't object to the partnership with the Quinn group, which was a victory. He currently has a supervisor overseeing him, but that person has a close personal relationship with him and stays out of day-to-day matters, focusing on building his own business. As a result, Detective Lance is essentially the sole bearer of the Star City Police Force. This situation needed to be resolved quickly, otherwise, if he got upset and turned against her, her reputation would be ruined. She also had to rescue Sarah as soon as possible. With her back, all the grudges would be resolved, at least with the Quinn group. As for whether the two sisters would end up fighting over a man, that was their own family affair, and Thea expressed complete indifference. Frowning, she recalled the events. Sarah Lance should be on that ship right now. If Oliver hadn't gone to town, she might still be safe for a few months. Knowing she still had some time, she put the rescue plan aside. She looked at Laurel, who looked distressed beside her. She couldn't tell if she was grieving her sister's death or if she still had feelings for Oliver. She couldn't remain indifferent to her help, so she gave her a hug. "Are you okay?" "It's okay, Thea. You're stronger than I thought," Laurel said, a little choked up. Although Thea knew Oliver and Sarah were still alive, she felt a pang of sadness at the passing of her adoptive father, Robert Sr., and quickly changed the subject. "Can you take me home? You know, I don't even have a driver's license." Laurel chuckled softly, and the two women returned to the slums together. Once there, Thea realized her so-called software department was very close to Laurel's law firm, just across the street. They agreed to meet for tea next time. In the evening, Thea arrived in the jungle as usual to prepare for today's training. Unknowingly, she had been training for 6 months, and had mastered archery, combat, and swordsmanship. According to Old Ma, she had the skills of an average member of the League of Assassins, only lacking experience. This differed from the original plot, perhaps due to the fact that like attracts like. The Flash is surrounded by speedsters, and Team Arrow employs a wide range of attacks. With Green Arrow, Roy, and Thea 1.0, there were 3 archers. The original Thea was supposed to focus on archery, followed by swordsmanship, and finally combat. But Thea didn't see it that way right now. She didn't see the need to join Team Arrow in the future. She could lend a hand when things got tough, no problem, he was her brother, after all, but she'd probably forget about joining. Her focus had always been on unexpected attacks. If she was prepared and equipped with the right technology, she wouldn't be invincible, but she could certainly escape unscathed. But a surprise attack would be disastrous. No matter how skilled she was in archery and swordsmanship, it wouldn't matter. After all, the real world was often fought with bare hands. Of course, you could say you had antisocial personality disorder and ran around with a machete, that was fine. But Thea considered herself too thin-skinned to pull off such a grandiose feat. She'd focused her training on bare-handed combat, including joint techniques, judo, karate, and KGB fighting techniques. She could evenly match Malcolm in bare-handed combat, but that was only when Malcolm controlled the power. The natural disparity in strength, size, and self-esteem between men and women couldn't be ignored. After waiting in the dense forest for a while, wondering why the usually punctual Malcolm was nowhere to be seen, she sensed several figures approaching from her right, cursing. 3 men of unknown age emerged. Why couldn't they tell? Because their makeup was horrific, all wearing black eyeshadow. It was evening, and the surrounding light was a bit dim. Combined with the dark clothing, they looked like the little black men in Conan's crime drama from a distance. Their clothes were adorned with various decorative rings, the only light they could see. Their gait was so wobbly that it looked more like they were gliding than walking. Where did these non-mainstream people come from? While Thea wasn't afraid of them, she didn't want to get involved. She turned around, ready to get out of their way and wait for Lao Ma on the other side of the forest. Hey, there's a woman over there. One of the non-mainstream people had a sharp eye and spotted Thea. The remaining 2 had drunk a bit too much, and their bodies reacted automatically to their companion's words, rushing over like a shot of adrenaline. Seeing them approach, Thea didn't plan to run. She vaguely understood that this was probably another test from Lao Ma, otherwise, why would these three idiots come into such a barren place? It was a good time to test her combat prowess, so Thea prepared to strike first. It wasn't that she was afraid of losing, but she was afraid they'd say something disgusting that would ruin her dinner. She tossed her bow and dagger aside and stretched her body briskly. Facing these three idiots, Thea was in a dilemma. They all looked like they deserved a beating, and she was having trouble deciding which one to attack first. "Hey, this chick," one scoundrel hadn't finished saying before Thea had already decided. It wasn't because he spoke first, of course, but because of scientific reasoning. That's it. There was no need to resort to any ultimate moves against these weaklings. At this stage, Thea's ultimate move was a KGB-style fighting technique similar to Marvel's Black Widow, leaping up, grabbing the opponent's neck, and twisting her waist to throw them. But this move looks very good, but Xia always feels a little awkward when using it. On the one hand, it is too lethal, and if it is not used properly, the neck will be broken and the head will be lost. On the other hand, Lao Ma did not teach it well, and this move is always a bit awkward for father and daughter to practice. She quickly grabbed the right hand of the gangster who was hitting her, twisted it in the opposite direction, and heard a sound like a pig being slaughtered. Seeing that the man had his back to her and his body was wide open, Xia wanted to use a karate move to grab the man's ear and kick him down. But she hesitated when her hand was halfway out. The man had a lot of earrings on his ears, like a hedgehog. Would he get hurt? Chapter 24 New Theory. Thea could only scratch his hair, discovering his unique hairstyle. It sat atop his head like a trident, with a sharp protrusion in the middle, like a Teletubby, and two strands of hair on either side, stubbornly growing backwards. The color of his hair, which shone green in the woods, made Thea think it must have been laced with heavy metal. So sinister, trying to poison me. After searching his hut for ages, Thea found no place to strike, frustrating her. For her own safety, she switched from karate to taekwondo. A kick to the knee brought him halfway to a kneeling position. Then, twisting, she delivered another kick to the lower back. This was a bit of a stretch. With her current strength, a direct kick to the spine would have confined the Teletubby to a bed for the rest of his life. Of course, this kick was no small feat. It would likely have taken a kidney and half his spleen. 2 strikes knocked one of the idiots down, and the remaining 2 finally reacted, screaming and attacking. One of them was relatively well behaved, just going through the motions of a proper street fighter, his right fist raised high, barely missing a cry of "take my punch." The other, a bit irritating, actually rushed over with a lecherous embrace. This idiot definitely had up to no good. She regretted throwing her bow and arrow in the air. He'd dirty her shoes. They were brand new, just days old. She dodged the well-behaved man and, under his incredulous gaze, leaped forward and kicked the sleazy man in the right cheek. Then she followed it up with a left and a right kick, finally muttering, "Die." A high kick connected with the sleazy man's jaw, cracking with such force that it likely shattered it completely, impacting his cervical vertebrae and collarbone to varying degrees. The last one left saw his 2 companions lying unconscious. With his brain like a paste, he realized that if he stayed any longer, he would be in danger. He quickly turned around and ran back the way he came. How could Xia let him get away? Such a big target with his back to her, it would be a waste of his kindness if he didn't shoot an arrow. It was a good opportunity to test out the archery skills she had improved recently. She picked up the bow and arrow on the ground, drew the bow and arrow without aiming, and shot an arrow based on her perception. The arrow was extremely fast, like a flash of lightning in the jungle. This guy didn't do anything excessive, at least he didn't disgust her. She wanted to teach him a little lesson, so Xia aimed at his calf. If he was treated well, he would be able to walk on crutches in 3 months. At that moment, the sound of applause reached her ears. Malcolm, still dressed in black as the Black Arrow, said hoarsely, "Well done. It seems you've learned most of my stuff. But why didn't you kill them? They're not good people. Aren't you afraid they'll retaliate against you later?" Thea had been pondering this question ever since she guessed he was testing her. To kill or not to kill has always been a perennial theme in American, Japanese, and manga, a topic that could be debated for days and nights. Most on the side of justice insisted on not killing, exemplified by Batman and the Flash. There were also those who initially engaged in a murder spree but eventually laid down their weapons, like her older brother, the Green Arrow. but they all ultimately chose not to kill, or rather, never to kill again. Killing or not killing is almost the defining line between heroes and villains. Crossing the line is a villain, not a hero. Naturally, Thea couldn't offer her father, a major villain, a heroic theory, so she borrowed and slightly modified Batman's theory to deceive him. Pointing at the original Teletubbies, he said, "The one over there leaning against a tree vomiting blood is currently experiencing subacute hemorrhage symptoms, along with spinal edema. If he's not taken to the operating room immediately, it will cause increased pressure on his internal organs, leading to a ruptured spleen, kidney failure, and sloughing of the internal organ mucosa." He then pointed at the wretched man lying on the ground, almost dead, and grinned, "This one's even worse. If he's not given emergency treatment within 30 minutes, he won't see the sun tomorrow morning. Even if he gets timely treatment, he'll be bedridden for the rest of his life. His central nervous system is already damaged, and unless modern medicine makes a major breakthrough, he'll be a cripple. And judging by the damage to his jaw, he'll never be able to speak again. As for the guy over there who I shot an arrow at, even if he recovers, he'll be a cripple for life. The compression of the nerves in his lower limbs will cause multiple sclerosis. There are too many specific symptoms, so we can only make a judgment after seeing a doctor. Besides, I've been standing in a backlit area since I found these three idiots. They didn't see my face, and judging by their attire, they don't look like they'd be equipped with high-definition cameras or infrared scanners," Zia said coldly. "Because of my decision today, their destiny has changed. Their original life trajectory may eventually turn back to justice and become a good person, or start a family and start a career and become an ordinary person. It is neither good nor bad, but with my strong intervention, they are all ruined. Isn't this the magic of fate? You all like to talk about fate, so I will talk about fate with you." Thea repackaged Batman's theory of not killing bad guys and only fighting to death with a fate of nothingness, and instantly turned into an evil version of the Declaration, just wondering if Master Bruce will beat him up. Marquez didn't expect that his daughter not only formed her own worldview, but also had a guiding theory. She had a little reflection for a while. Could it be that she had been killing people and was wrong? Killing becomes a relief, and keeping it is a torture? Comparing his own experience, it makes sense. His wife died when she died. He was a living person who suffered 20 years of sin. Zia was right. Thinking about Robert and Oliver, they died just because they said they were dead. Morasia was full of torment. So this is possible? It seems that not killing is far more cruel than killing. Although Malcolm hadn't fully grasped his daughter's answer, he had already partially accepted it. Remembering another matter he had originally planned, he decided to put aside the dispute and get down to business. "Whether you're right or wrong, it's your own opinion. That's fine. You asked me to train you, and I've fulfilled your wish. Now there's only one step left. Let me see the results of your training," Malcolm said, drawing his katana and pointing it at the ground, slowly approaching Thea. "It seems that tonight's exercise isn't over yet. Judging by the way he holds the sword. Does he want me to fight you in a fair duel? You're kidding. My father is far more capable than a punk." Thea didn't dare to be careless. She drew her bow and fired, using her powerful senses to take the lead. Pa, pa, the sound of arrows blasted continuously. Thea unleashed 6 arrows in a single breath, covering the entire space around Malcolm. Knowing this wouldn't hinder him, she grabbed the weapon she had left on the ground, a longsword and a dagger, and ducked into the shade of the trees. Chapter 25. This is the first battle. Malcolm was increasingly bewildered by his illegitimate daughter. His original plan had been for a thrilling battle between them, for him to defeat her with absolute superiority, for her to recognize her weaknesses and maintain her motivation to keep moving forward. It had been a perfect plan, but how had it gone so wrong? When Thea's arrows came blazing, Malcolm realized his mistake in not having a bow. He was now forced to defend against ranged attacks, his blade in both hands constantly deflecting the arrows, dodging and blocking them. Only then did he realize Thea was gone. Damn it! Who of us was trained by the League of Assassins? Why are you sneaking up on me? Malcolm knew Thea was still nearby, but his perception was inferior, so he had to constantly shift his pace, wary of any possible attack, putting him at a slight disadvantage. He could only hope his daughter was young and impatient. If she attacked first, his fighting skills would level the score, or even defeat her. The two began a test of patience. Thea, now hidden behind a tree, silently watched Malcolm's shoulders and feet. She didn't dare stare directly, for at their level, hostile gazes were a reflex. She roughly calculated Malcolm's range, which was around 8 meters, while hers was only 15 meters, giving her a completely dominant position. She circled 20 meters behind him and fired an arrow from a distance. With a flash of her long sword, it split in two. Malcolm quickly ran in the direction of the arrow, but when he got close, he realized Thea had vanished again. No, he couldn't fight like this. He was old, and any more would cost him his strength. Malcolm turned back to retrieve his bow and arrow. With it in hand, he could resist her harassment and counterattack with his own arrows, effectively suppressing her. After all, Thea's archery was far inferior to his. How could Thea let him have his way? With him only 3 steps away from the bow and arrow, she swiftly released 2 more arrows. One aimed at the weapon on the ground, ensuring he would be hit if he reached out. The other aimed at the ground, leaving him unable to advance or stop, only to retreat. The two of them then played like a game. No matter which direction Malcolm ran, Thea always found her range. With a whoosh, 2 arrows flew past, and Comrade Malcolm would obediently return to his starting position, and the cycle would begin all over again. Malcolm was furious. Where did she learn these tactics? Why was it so difficult for him to have a good fight? After being forced back for the 5th time, he had finally grasped Thea's pattern. This time, he had to get the bow and arrow. Whoosh, 2 sharp arrows arrived as expected. Malcolm, his mind intensely focused, hurled his katana with swift force, deflecting the arrows hurled at the weapons. He simultaneously rolled forward to avoid an arrow aimed at him. He was secretly delighted. He had the bow and arrows. Now, a counterattack would completely turn the tide. Just as he was contemplating a good opportunity, he suddenly felt a surge of energy locking onto him. What was going on? He quickly turned around and saw Thea, gliding towards him at lightning speed. Ah! Thea cried out, feeling a surge of exhilaration she had never experienced before, as if every cell in her body was cheering. With a dagger in her left hand and a longsword in her right, she pounced on Malcolm with the swiftness of a cheetah. Why had she suddenly abandoned ranged combat for close combat? Malcolm quickly realized he had made a simple mistake. She was out of arrows, and he had forgotten to count them, believing she could keep firing. This also explained her high rate of fire, the psychological pressure she put on herself to distract herself from counting the number of arrows. After firing her last arrow, she didn't even check the result before charging forward with all her might. It was like a sprint. A false start can give you a significant advantage over a normal start. This was exactly what Thea was doing. Only after she'd gotten within 10 meters of them did Malcolm realize he'd been tricked. Even worse, he'd miscalculated and thrown his own sword. Looking at the katana stuck in the tree in the distance, Malcolm felt like the swords were mocking him. Damn it! He'd made a series of blunders today. Was he really getting old? Whether he was old or not was beyond question, but Thea was already in front of him like a gust of wind, stabbing with a dagger in her left hand and slashing with a longsword in her right. Was he supposed to use his bow to block it? The recurve bow wasn't insurmountable, but it was awkward to use, and it lacked any lethality. He tried to draw his bow and force Thea back, but he couldn't find the chance. It was truly a case of things changing. He'd been eagerly anticipating a close combat, only to realize he'd already dropped his knife when the time came. It was truly tragic. Malcolm's constant parrying and blocking, though incredibly awkward, gradually gained a foothold as his powerful melee skills shone. Although Thea had previously been running him in circles, she'd also been expending considerable energy. After all, with a pile of weapons as her center, Malcolm was running in small circles while she was running in large ones. As the battle intensified, the woman's inherent lack of strength and endurance gradually became apparent. Knowing she was doomed to failure, Thea took a risky tactic, throwing her dagger like a flying knife at Malcolm's face. Just as Malcolm thought he was turning the tide, he saw the knife hurtling towards him. He instinctively leaned forward to swipe it, only to realize the knife had no power when the two weapons collided. Knowing he was about to break, Thea ducked, two-handed, and slashed at his ribs. Danger! I can't dodge this attack. His only weapon, the bow, was thrusting upward, leaving him wide open. Facing this brutal blow, he could only twist his waist as hard as he could, trying to minimize the damage. He simultaneously dropped the bow with his right hand and, using the force of his twisting waist, clenched his left fist and struck Thea in the face. With a muffled thud, Thea stumbled back 2 steps, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. She paid no attention to her injuries, but instead observed her accomplishments with a smug grin. "Huh. Black Arrow, you're injured. The wound looks 10 centimeters long. Can you still use your waist strength? Can you still run at full speed? You told me it's better to injure your legs than your waist. You've always told me to incapacitate my enemies. While that's true, do you still believe that? Damn it. That wasn't my words. How could a former billionaire like me say such a thing?" That was said by a ninja master. Malcolm was incredibly upset. He was injured. He was beaten by his daughter, who had been learning for half a year. With his personality, he wouldn't say that relying on conspiracy and trickery is not a hero. Although he felt a little frustrated, the rest of his feeling was full of pride. What kind of ninja master is the best gardener in DC? The one we taught is not bad either. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.